Good afternoon and welcome to the Digital Skills Symposium and Town Hall. This event today is hosted by the Media Bureau of the Federal Communications Commission and the Communications Equity and Diversity Council of the FCC. The CEDC is a federal advisory committee of the FCC chartered by Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel. One of the primary goals of the CEDC is to make recommendations to the Commission on advancing equity in the provision of and access to communication services and products for all people of the United States without discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, or disability. Today's program was developed and planned by the Innovation and Access Working Group of the CEDC. The program will proceed in three parts. First, we will have the keynote remarks by former acting FCC Chairwoman Mignon Clyburn, and we are so grateful to have her join us today. Following the keynote remarks, we will have a panel discussion on the Digital Equity Act, the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, and other efforts to address access to broadband. Following the panel discussion, we will have a short 15-minute break. Then we will return and have what we expect will be a lively town hall discussion among a diverse range of stakeholders and experts about broadband equity. So let's get started. Joining us today to bring welcome remarks and introduce our keynote speaker is Susan Allen, National President and CEO of the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce. Susan also serves as Vice Chair of the CEDC, and we're grateful to her for all that she does to support the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Good afternoon, Susan.
Hello, Jamila. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming and joining us this afternoon. That's right. I am Susan Allen, National President and CEO of the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce Education Foundation. In short, we're called USPAC. And welcome to the Digital Skills Gap Symposium and Town Hall, brought to you by the Federal Communications Commission's Media Bureau and CEDC. I want to recognize the continued public leadership of FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel, the FCC, and the Biden administration for their diligent efforts in prioritizing the closing of America's digital divide and digital skills gap. Since last fall, I have the privilege to serve as Vice Chair of the CEDC, an honor I share with my fellow Vice Chair, Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee. Together with Chairwoman Heather Gate, our charge at the CEDC is to focus on diversity and equity issues across the tech sector and provide the FCC with specific policy recommendations for advancing, as Jamila said, equity in the provision of and access to digital communication services and products for every American community. Our goal is no family or community will be left behind, and everyone can fully access the technology and digital skills that are building our future, America's future. I want to thank FCC Designated Federal Officer Jamila Beth Johnson and her team, including Kayla Hernandez-Orla and Aurelie Matthew, for being the guiding light that helped the entire CDC navigate this complex discussion. Today's symposium and town hall will examine the challenges and issues that states and localities face in addressing the need for greater adoption of digital skills training and what government, community-based organizations, and other diverse stakeholders are doing or could do more to close our nation's digital divide and advance digital literacy for all Americans. Our panel discussion will cover the FCC's work on closing this divide through its Affordable Connectivity Program and other innovative initiatives. We will provide an overview of the Digital Equity Act, its funding, and its implications for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. We'll explore how to define equity, a critically important question, how stakeholders can identify populations that remain underserved or unserved, and articulate the impacts of the persistent divide on the communities left out of this ecosystem. We'll hear best practices and examples of the states that have digital equity offices or that are developing plans and procedures to address the issue. We expect an energetic and robust informative town hall discussion with experts from a range of perspectives, including faith-based institutions, civil rights organizations, library services, local government, and historically Black colleges and universities. We'll have a dialogue on how to break down the silos among corporate entities, nonprofits, and government agencies, as well as lessons learned so far. Closing America's digital skills gap is a critical policy priority for federal, state, and local government, nonprofits, and businesses. Frankly, it is an imperative for every American who believes in equality, equity, and building a strong economy for all of us and the future generations. The pandemic laid bare the vital necessity of more workers having these 21st century skills and the need for even greater digital connectivity and access, especially for unserved and underserved minority communities. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker. Former acting FCC Chairwoman Mignon was sworn in for her first term as commissioner in August 2009 and for a second term in February 2013, and served until June 6, 2018. She also served as acting FCC Chairwoman from May through November 4, 2013. While at the FCC, she was dedicated to closing our nation's digital divide. She advocated for lifeline modernization, which helps low-income consumers to defray the cost of broadband service. She championed diversity in media ownership, initiated inmate calling services reform. She emphasized diversity and inclusion in STEM opportunities while working to preserve a free and open internet. Before her tenure at the FCC, she spent 11 years as a member of the 6th District on the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. And prior to that leadership role, she was publisher and general manager of her family-founded newspaper for 14 years, the Coastal Times, a Charleston-based weekly newspaper focused primarily on issues affecting the African American community. An impressive person with an impressive background and an impressive record of successful public leadership and advocacy. And that's our keynote speaker today. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome former FCC Chairwoman Mignon Clyburn.
Thank you so much, Ms. Allen, for that most generous introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I really am pleased to be invited to take part in this, the FCC's Digital Skills Gap Symposium and Town Hall. It is an honor to be asked, let me say that to you, and I am pleased to see those of you who remain committed to building digital bridges. While there are many issues the Equity and Diversity Council could commit its time, skills, and resources to pursuing, I can think of few as important in the 21st century as closing persistent digital divides and advancing digital literacy. I thought long and hard about the message I want to leave with you today. Like so many of our issues, there are multiple complex layers to the challenges of narrowing and ultimately eliminating this existing gap. But I am confident that the solution to this crucially important national issue will come with the involvement and courageous pursuit of this council. Today, I will not yield to the temptation of speaking about the levels of federal or private funding committed to this effort, nor will I talk about specific program initiatives or benefit programs. Those facts and figures are readily available, well known to each of you, and thoroughly discussed. Instead, I will use the remainder of my time to highlight what I call a path less traveled. When we speak about digital equity, we are addressing an immensely wide and varied spectrum of issues and constituencies. At one end, we grapple with the economic, social, and political logistics of deploying broadband access to all Americans, regardless of where they live or what income bracket they fall into. At the other end of the spectrum, we contend with the hows. How to improve digital literacy for all Americans, from the disconnected to the most digitally advanced. Additionally, this spectrum covers a subtext of concerns that address numerous related digital equity topics. Just as this nation has in the past realized the value in funding public works projects, the Hoover Dam, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the interstate highway system, it has fully, and yes, I will say this again, finally realized the value of an interconnected, broadband-enabled nation. Some were slow to come on board, while others argued passionately that broadband was a public good of equal importance as other essential services like energy, water, and telecommunications. But now we all agree that we must address and navigate the complicated art of delivering this public good to all Americans. How do we efficiently, successfully, and sustainably ensure that affordable broadband and digital skills literacy reaches every student, every employee, every retiree, every American? How do we not only work to achieve ubiquitous access to broadband technology and digital learning, but elevate the notion that acquisition of those resources represents digital citizenship? And is digital citizenship a non-negotiable, inalienable right for every American? A bold and aspirational question. I know the challenge, the opportunity for us, I say, is to have bold and aspirational answers. It is becoming more and more evident that one's ability to engage in social discourse, conduct business, shop, gain access to healthcare, find a place to live, or connect with loved ones are severely restrained or effectively undermined without access to and confidence in digital platforms. For those left behind on those analog islands, they're not living in some resort paradise. Predominantly low net worth and disproportionately communities of color are faced with the greatest barriers to full digital inclusion because they are most likely the ones stuck in communities with inadequate material resources. Notably, health and educational access lacking, lower rates of educational attainment, and exclusion from those ambitious and expansive infrastructure plans that we hear about each and every day. Given these realities, it would seem to make sense to think about digital literacy and closing the digital skills gap, not simply in terms of how much money is committed to any given program, but how and where the money is leveraged, such that reasonably positive outcomes can be gauged. I contend that we must be vigilant custodians of measures of success, not sticklers on a specific dollar amount as measures of success. Now, we all can identify programs where years and billions of dollars later, outcomes seem to be not significantly or irreversibly improved. And before I say another word, let the record reflect that I am a stickler for fiscal responsibility. What I am saying is a long-term strategy for learning makes sense. The creation of a digital skills framework that is aligned with proven approaches to learning that could be standardized to teach specific target demographics digital skills. That makes sense to me. And if we are in this for the long haul, and we are, right? We owe it to those who have yet to realize the full digital promise to first meet them where they are. Second, schedule times to listen to what they have to say, because they actually have many of the answers. Newsflash, they live it each and every day. They see it, They know their communities, they know their needs. And they know what is more likely to work. What they lack are the means and the resources to implement those known to them workable solutions. Another stop on this road less traveled is to be realistic when it comes to assisting households that are at or below the federal poverty level. Many are challenged with negative incomes, meaning that their monthly expenses are greater than their monthly incomes. In other words, they are in perpetual debt. While it is difficult for any program to resolve 100% of any given issue, I think it is both wise and responsible to remind ourselves that there are demographics in real danger of never achieving full digital citizenship. It is doubtful that a monthly credit in any amount that results in a bill with a balance that is due would be manageable for that household. This reality would result in a very low take rate for it with this particular demographic. So not only must we have good programs, but we must be creative. Take continual reality checks when it comes to resolving the digital skills gap for all. As I close, I want to affirm that the work this committee does is not only impressive, but crucial. The nation needs the CEDC now more than ever. And on behalf of the nation's constituency that benefits as a result of your thoughtful advocacy, those like me coming into you from my local neighborhood library in Richland County, South Carolina by choice, and those on the outside that are here by necessity. I thank you for recognizing that no matter how yeoman the work, success will not come from a single step or a single agency's effort, but the foundation for that success is often laid by a single knitted influencer like you. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a robust discussion today.
Well, my goodness. We thank you so much, former acting chairwoman Clyburn, for those stirring remarks. Let's hashtag analog islands are not a resort paradise. Yeah, let's talk about that. Thank you for taking time to be with us today and to help us appreciate what's really at stake in this pivotal moment in time. So the stage has been set perfectly for our panel discussion now. And it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator, Heather Gate. Ms. Gate is Vice President for Digital Inclusion at Connected Nation. Heather also serves as chair of the CEDC. Heather is a well-recognized expert on digital equity, broadband access, and deployment. She is the perfect person to moderate our panel discussion, and we're so pleased that she is able to be with us here today. We turn the program over to you now, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamila, for that warm welcome. I am humbled by it. I also want to thank Commissioner Clyburn for those inspiring opening comments and reminding us of what is at stake for our discussion today. We are extremely appreciative of your public service and your commitment to bridging the digital divide for communities that have been disproportionately represented on the wrong side of the digital divide. And thank you again for taking us through the road less traveled, where we should recognize that access should be a non-negotiable right for everyone to digital citizenship, and that we must be diligent on how and where we spend the money, and that it is very important for us to meet people where they are and also to listen to them. So I hope our town hall participants and members of the public take heed to your word and the words will resonate throughout the day as it is extremely relevant for the conversation that we are about to have. I also want to thank my fellow chair, Susan Allen. Thank you. My apologies. I'm on camera now. Okay. I want to thank Susan Allen for opening for us today. Susan is a very inspiring and passionate advocate for this space. So I'm very honored to serve with her on the CEDC. I also want to thank our Vice Chairwoman, Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee, who's a giant and an expert in these matters and is our preacher when it comes to expressing passion on these matters. And now I would like to welcome everybody to our panel segment of our agenda today. I will be inviting our panelists to join us on camera shortly. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit about why we prepared this agenda today. So the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, as devastating as it has been, has presented us a significant opportunity to reflect on the challenges related to the digital divide. As Commissioner Clyburn outlined, it took a while for some people to get to where we are today, and that is understanding the digital divide. But it is also an opportunity for us to fix the challenges of the digital divide that have persisted throughout the ages. So in November 2021, President Biden signed the $1.2 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the IIJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This historic and bipartisan legislation included $65 billion for addressing broadband infrastructure and adoption needs. Now, this is broken down into $42.4 billion for a broadband equity access and deployment program that you will hear more about later on our agenda, also known as BEAD, which primarily focuses on funding deployment of high-speed internet infrastructure, but also supports job training and providing equipment need and driving collaboration to get everyone online. $14.2 billion of the funding is targeted towards the Affordability Connectivity Program. And this program is designed to help consumers with discounts for high-speed broadband and devices. $2.75 billion of the funding is for digital equity programs. The funding is designed for 3 different programs that collectively help states develop digital equity plans and advance activities related to advancing digital equity and inclusion, including workforce development and digital skills training. The rest of the funding goes towards a series of programs, including Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, Middle Mile Broadband Program, and other smaller grant programs that existed prior to the Broadband Infrastructure Law. This marks a pivotal moment in our country's history because we have a great opportunity to ensure that everyone has access to high-speed internet connections, affordable devices, digital skills, and the tools necessary to participate in our democracy and in the economy of the 21st century. It goes without saying that we must work together with the unified purpose of advancing digital equity and addressing access and adoption issues that have plagued vulnerable communities in our nation, despite all the work that we have been doing throughout the years. Nothing could have made these issues more apparent than the COVID-19 lockdowns of 2020. They exposed challenges faced by children who did not have access to connectivity and devices at home. They exposed challenges for older adults who did not have the digital skills or access to devices in order to be able to schedule vaccination appointments, or the workers who are not able to enjoy the opportunities to telework. So the question is, why are we here today? We are here today because the Innovation and Access Working Group of the CEDC aims to contribute to a diversity framework that could inform the development of a national digital upskilling plan. Given the backdrop of the unprecedented funding opportunities, the working group feels that it is important to have this frank discussion about the digital skills challenge in the United States on this platform. Research shows us that the United States ranks 29th on the global platform on digital literacy. As a result, American and global employers are struggling to fill millions of middle skill positions. Estimates suggest that investments in upskilling, training workers with digital skills can boost the world's GDP over $6 trillion by the end of the decade. Additionally, the Innovation and Access Working Group believes that the United States must develop and deploy new models of community-based digital upskilling or reskilling or job pairing. Further, given the demographics of America's digital skills gap, such models must address equity and diversity in all actionable solutions. Therefore, the working group has invited a diverse group of subject matter experts from across the country to today's town hall forum. The town hall participants will share their perspectives on digital upskilling, best practices, lesson learned, and innovative ideas. The town hall participants include representatives from faith-based institutions, civil rights organizations, digital literacy services, local government, and historical Black colleges and universities. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel. The Innovation and Access Working Group felt that it was prudent to precede the town hall discussion with a panel discussion with an amazing group of leaders who can share critical information on the IIJA programs and how we can effectively ensure an effective rollout of funding and success in moving the needle in bridging the digital divide and advancing digital equity as the IIJA requires. This panel will essentially help to set the stage for the town hall meeting. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, and now I would like to introduce our panelists. And as I introduce you, please. I'm being muted for some reason. Okay, I'm back on. So I would like to introduce Rashawn Duval. And Rashawn, feel free to turn your camera on. Rashawn is the Assistant Division Chief in Telecommunications Access Policy Division of the Wireline Competition Bureau with the Federal Communications Commission. Thank you for joining us. I would like to introduce Angela Bennett. Angela is the Digital Equity Director with the United States Department of Commerce National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Welcome, Angela. I would like to introduce John Horgan. John is a Senior Fellow with the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society. Welcome, John. Introduce Angela Seifer. Angela is the Executive Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Welcome, Angela. Introduce Sally Dottie. She's the Director of the Mississippi Broadband Office. Sally, if you're here, if you can jump on camera. Okay, I will go ahead and introduce Catherine while we wait. Catherine Keegan is the director of the Colorado Department of Labor, Office of the Future of Work. Okay, and Jeff, is Sally with us? All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started on our panel. Thank you so much, panel, for joining us today. I'll begin with you, Rashawn. Rashawn, thank you again for joining us. Can you talk about the FCC's role in implementing the IIJA, specifically the Affordable Connectivity Program? Can you offer a description of the program and its status today, who is eligible to participate, and how you can participate?
Sure. Thank you, Heather. And thank you for your outstanding leadership of the CEDC. Good afternoon, everyone. As Heather mentioned, my name is Rashawn Duval, and I'm an Assistant Division Chief in the Telecommunications Access Policy Division in the FCC's Wireline Competition Bureau. I'm a member of the team that works on the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program. It is great to have this opportunity today to speak with you all about the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program. And thank you to the CEDC Chairwoman and her co-chairs, the members of the CEDC, and the FCC staff involved in putting this event together today. The Affordable Connectivity Program was created under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. You'll hear us referring to that as the Infrastructure Act throughout the panel today. And the Congress allotted $14.2 billion for the Affordable Connectivity Program. Some of you may be familiar with its predecessor program, which was the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that was created during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Affordable Connectivity Program began on December 31st, 2021. The Affordable Connectivity Program provides a discount off an eligible household's monthly broadband bill and a one-time device discount. The monthly service discount is up to $30 a month for broadband service, including associated equipment rentals, and up to $75 a month for households on qualifying tribal lands. There's also a one-time device discount that is up to $100 to purchase a laptop, desktop, computer, or tablet from participating providers if the eligible household contributes more than $10 and less than $50 towards the purchase price of that device. The benefit is limited to one per household. In terms of who is eligible, a household is eligible if it participates in a number of federal assistance programs or has an income that is at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. The types of assistance programs that qualify are SNAP, Medicaid, Federal Public Housing Assistance, SSI, WIC, or the Lifeline program. You can also qualify by participating in tribal-specific programs such as the Bureau of Indian Affairs General Assistance, Tribal TANF, or Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations. Households that are approved to receive benefits under the Free and Reduced Price School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program, including through the USDA Community Eligibility Provision, also known as CEP. Households are also eligible if they received a federal Pell Grant during the current award year, or if they meet the eligibility criteria for a participating provider's existing low-income program. Households would qualify for the program by submitting an application, and applications are available at affordableconnectivity.gov. I believe at the end of the panel, we'll be circulating a link with just more general information about the Affordable Connectivity Program, and that link will also include the actual link for submitting applications for the program.
Thank you.
And just to highlight and give people some numbers, because I know people like to hear numbers, we've seen extensive growth in the Affordable Connectivity Program since it launched in December, both in terms of participation by households and providers. And currently we are at over 13 million households enrolled in the ACP program.
Thank you, Rashawn. That was great information, and we will share the details at the end of the panel. Angela Bennett. In March, it was announced that the NTIA was hiring the first digital equity director. signaling a commitment to digital equity by them having it in the title. And I read in an article published by NDIA, actually, that this is the first ever position in the federal government to have the digital equity in it. So that's exciting. It really does signal a commitment to getting to fixing the problem if you're willing to define it within a job for somebody. So can you tell us a little bit about your role at the NTIA? And also, can you talk a little bit about the DEA and what the NTIA is doing?
Okay. So I thought, well, thanks a lot, Heather. And what I want to also note is that not only did the federal government and the president and Congress create the title and the position, because so often we see, these positions without funding to support and drive the work. So the funding that's behind the position to help fund and drive the work is really what makes it so transformative for our country. And so what we are charged with doing in the digital equity program is to, through the planning and capacity grants, work directly with states and help them develop their state digital equity plans. And what that looks like is we have state federal program officers that are assigned to each state, not just to manage the programs, but to really be that boots on the ground and engage with communities. And so we're modeling what robust engagement looks like, and not only just having the community come to our table, but we are actually going out to the community's planning table and listening and hearing from them what their needs and desires are for their community, because they are the ones who do know best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, John, welcome. We are honored to have you on this panel as a renowned expert on data and just helping us understand the reality of the digital divide. Tell us about your work to help us level set for the discussion later on today. Where are we today as far as the digital divide? Who is most affected by it? And where do they live? Also, if you have data on digital skilling as well, that would be great.
Sure, Heather, thank you. And thanks to the SEC and the committee for inviting me today. In terms of the digital divide, we've seen over the past decade a steady narrowing of the digital divide, mostly because of the uptake of mobile devices for people. There are still significant adoption gaps across the lines of race and ethnicity, particularly severe divides when you look at income. Low-income Americans are half as likely to have a wireline subscription at home than upper-income Americans. And we see also among low-income Americans a departure from the norm of access. And by that, I mean today, the norm for internet access for most Americans is to have two robust ways to get online: a wireline subscription at home and a mobile device with a smart data plan. Most Americans have two. Lower income Americans can only afford one typically, and they have to choose. And oftentimes that's a mobile device only, which, as we learned in the pandemic, has severe limits for carrying out tasks like homework and telehealth. So I think it's important to keep an eye on the ball of the demographics of the digital divide, which still, as I said, is along lines of race and ethnicity, particularly severe for low-income Americans. And I think also we've become much more attuned in the past couple of years to the geography of the digital divide. In terms of low uptake of services, there are low-income areas in American cities with extremely low broadband adoption rates. I live in Baltimore, and I know of census tracts where a third or fewer of households have wireline broadband access. So we know that the gaps exist. We have a good feel for where they are in terms of adoption. We also know a couple things about digital skills. One is, if you look at survey data, there's significant demand for digital skills training. And then secondly, it works, which is to say, we know from research that training for digital skills does have a positive impact on the scope of online activities that people do. So I'm happy to be here and be part of the discussion. I'll turn it back to you for now, Heather.
Thank you, John, and thank you for pointing out the importance of digital skills and that it works, because sometimes it gets overlooked by the very nature of the fact that sometimes there's value in a person earning quality of life skills that are not necessarily registering at a college level or certification level, but yet the experience of participating in a class and leaving that classroom with a level of comfort about going online is very important. So thank you for introducing that. Angela, thank you for joining us, and congratulations on the great work. In July, I read that I know that NDIA released its first impact report, and it was a fantastic report that indicates that NDIA has over 750 affiliates in 48 states, and that NDIA that is galvanizing a community of digital inclusion practitioner and giving them a voice on platforms such as this, which prior to this was a very big challenge for small digital inclusion practitioners. And so can you talk a little bit about why this is important, especially as we prepare to develop plans for digital equity and broadband plans? So why is coalition building important, and why was it important for you to lead?
Thanks, Heather. It's awesome to be here with you all. This is a rock star panel. So NDIA, we formed it about 7.5, 8 years ago, because as you mentioned, those folks that are doing the digital inclusion work on the ground did not have a voice. I think our 2.75 billion shows they do now have a voice. They also influenced ACP and other resources that we have now. So NDIA is a place for those folks to talk to each other, peer-to-peer networking. We have lots of resources on the website, digitalinclusion.org. But also we do keep taking what we learn from the folks locally and explaining to policymakers what the realities are on the ground. And one of those realities is the one John just described about folks needing both a mobile connection and a wireline connection. So I really love that he covered that. We see coalitions as really essential to moving the work forward, because we need to make sure that we are recognizing existing assets and then not duplicating services and learning from what's out there, which is often happens when people talk to each other, right? And so that's a really important role of the coalitions and in the states, and I'm sure we're going to hear about this a little bit, the engagement that that the state folks are doing around talking to local folks. The digital equity work is really a local exercise. It's a local activity, right? Who's teaching someone how to use the internet? They're not doing it from the state capitol, right? They're doing it from the town where that person is. Who's helping them sign up for broadband service? Who's explaining ACP? It tends to be somebody in that area, because there are social considerations, there's language, there's culture, right? There's all the things that come with trust. And if we don't have trust, then we're not gonna make the gains that we all want to make. So what we're seeing right now is a need for all hands on deck, right? Like everybody needs to be engaged in this. And I'm excited about how the states are going to gather folks together.
Thank you so much. And it's I think what's exciting is that the IIJA recognizes the importance of work stakeholder engagement. And so it is in line with what NDIA has been doing for 8 years. And now our next two speakers, we're honored to have two representatives for state offices. And state offices have this awesome and challenging task of managing the big grants and getting things done. And I'm sure they will talk about how they would love for you to all participate and help along the way. So I am going to say hello to Sally and just want to do a sound check because how are you doing?
Good. I'm good. Is my sound coming through?
Perfect. Perfect.
Great.
Perfect. Perfect. So congratulations on your appointment as the director of Mississippi's broadband office. I love the name Beam, just makes me smile. Can you talk about your office's role in the state and what folks can expect from you in the coming months, especially as the money starts rolling in for BEAD and for DEA?
I certainly will, and thank you for having me today. So we are a new broadband office. I think Mississippi, we came in under the wire and we're one of the last states to stand up a broadband office, and we did that through legislation this year. So we really began work on July 1 of this year. So a lot of we are working as hard and as fast as we can, swimming as fast as we can. But our office will be coordinating the Capital Projects Fund, BEAD funding, and also the Digital Equity and Inclusion Fund. We are in the process of hiring a contract worker right now to manage that program for us, and I think we've got somebody great. I'm coming to you right now from the children's section of the library in Holmes County, Mississippi. Holmes County is a county of about 17,000 people, has a 34% poverty rate. Median income's about 24,000, and they had a program set up today. I was in the legislature prior to my time here, and so several of my legislative friends had a meeting this morning, and so we were here to talk about broadband access, and half of the county is unserved, totally unserved. So we were talking about strategies, not only for service, but then looking ahead to these issues of accessibility and affordability. Met some great people this morning, and really that's what we're going to be doing around the state, is working with these different communities. Of course, we have already formed a core planning team for our digital equity plan that's going to be required. And we've met twice. Andy Burke came down and visited with us. He was in town in Jackson, Mississippi for an announcement of a tribal grant. And so we took that opportunity to have our first meeting of our core planning team. And he kind of got us all inspired. And we met again yesterday. And we really have such a great group of people at the table who can talk about existing programs that we have in Mississippi, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to spend our money very carefully and to have the most impact that we can. So, we had our state land grant institution, Mississippi State. We had their extension service there. We think they're going to be a valuable partner. The Mississippi Library Commission, their deputy director was there. They are already very engaged. And in fact, I'm in Lexington, Mississippi. I knew I could find Wi-Fi at the local library, so that's why I'm here. So they're doing a tremendous job already. We want to help support them, and then just other organizations throughout the state. So we're at the beginning of this. There really has not been a lot of planning as far as digital equity in the state of Mississippi. So we're looking forward to having a good plan to submit and really get to work here in our state, because there seem to be so many needs here.
Thank you so much. And this is unplanned, but thank you for joining us from Exhibit 1, where the place where digital literacy training has been happening for many years, and providing access to internet for people that didn't have service at home. So libraries continue to play a critical role in digital skills training. They also continue to experience significant challenges in terms of funding and sustaining training programs. So this is a good time for libraries to also be part of the conversation, because they're important.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine, thank you again for joining. You work for the Colorado Department of Labor's Office of the future of work. If there's nothing that's more progressive than an office called the future of work, I don't know. To me, it seems to represent Colorado's commitment to training and upskilling a workforce in an ever-changing global economy, which is a great idea to have a future, such an office. Can you tell us more about this office and how it came about, and then your priorities in that office?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. It's so exciting to hear from everyone. And these are all the experts I reach out to and whose organizations have helped us with the work we've done so far. So it's great to be among them. So yeah, the Office of the Future of Work is an office that is relatively new. It was established in September of 2019 through an executive order from Governor Polis here in Colorado. And so when the office was established, it was tasked with raising awareness about what the future of work looks like in Colorado, and then identifying policy and program solutions so that we could have a skilled and resilient workforce. So, starting in September 2019, a few months before the pandemic hit, was an interesting time to be thinking about the future of work, because it was certainly a buzzwordy term before the pandemic, and even more so now is on the top of everyone's mind, is how do we manage these types of changes? How do we build resilience for workers, employers, and communities? So the office has a few key initiatives that it oversees, one of which is our state apprenticeship agency. So we believe apprenticeships and work-based learning are the future of work, because skills are changing so rapidly, needs of employers are changing, and so building that lifelong learning culture and on-ramps and off-ramps to education and work are critical for our success. And then also we oversee the state's digital equity, literacy, and inclusion initiative. So when the office was established, we were looking at places where there wasn't that coordinating effort at the state level for things that needed that coordination and were part of the needs for the future of work. And so the digital divide was a huge piece of that, as technology is already part of everyone's job, and every job is tech enabled. And as technology creates new jobs for people, we knew that there needed to be this coordinating effort. We were lucky to have a broadband office in place already, a great broadband office that is really focused on that infrastructure side of things and has been. And so we had the opportunity to think more about the adoption and where we need to understand the gaps, how we identify and fund those interventions that really work to close that divide and increase adoption. So we are in partnership with the Broadband Office, as well as Colorado's Office of eHealth Innovation, leading the state planning effort. We also have some state funding from legislation last year to deploy digital navigators. So learning a lot from all the resources from NDIA and Digital Us to think about how we do that most effectively, both to close the divide and connect those that are disconnected, but also to inform our state plan and really understand where the gaps are. And then we convene various committees. So we have one that will be focused on the state agency partners, recognizing that we all, as we turn more and more services online, how do we make sure that everyone has access and the resources to benefit from our public services, but then also have a digital equity committee that's made up of our community-based organizations and those that engage lived experts in the disconnected across the state. So those are our key initiatives within the digital equity, literacy, and inclusion space. We have a lot of work to do, but excited for that work ahead.
Thank you so much. I noted something interesting in listening to both of you, Sally and Catherine, cross-agency collaboration. I heard, I think it's very critical to, when we're talking about digital equity, to not be in the tunnel and sort of recognize the importance of bringing those conversations into healthcare because of telehealth and the different parts of what constitutes digital equity. So that's really great to know. Angela Bennett, I'm going to go back to you. So the great news is we have passed the initial deadlines for applying for planning money, and it's all states and U.S. territories that have submitted their application. Yay, everybody's doing the work or getting started. And 470 tribal governments. So can you talk a little bit about that and the connection between between BEAD and the DEA?
So as far as the connection between how the two programs work together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yes, happy that all states and territories and we had an unprecedented number of tribal entities submit their letters of intent. So Louisiana has already received their award. They were the first state to receive both their BEAD and DE award. And then early October, we will be rolling out additional awards as well. And so states will have 1 year to develop their digital equity plans. And they will have 270 days to develop their BEAD plans. Both, and we're in the statute and the NOFA requires that they both work together. So what we're seeing is states working together, we're requiring, robust local engagement as evidenced by Sally, right? She's writing an engagement, as we speak, right? And so what we're encouraging is, instead of going out for BEAD and going out for DE, because the covered populations, what's defined as covered populations in digital equity are underrepresented communities in BEAD. So we're serving, the same population. So just really collaborating, having the two departments as you're seeing with Sally and Catherine, that interagency approach. And what, the President Biden talks about, the whole of nation approach. And so as we look at this funding, it's not just, NTIA or the states rolling out their plans, but it's really all of the federal agencies, working together. It's the states crossing their agencies. It's working closely with community-based organizations and even, our organizations that you don't normally are at the table. And so states are kind of peeling back that layer and just reaching those who have been left out and left behind. So it's really going to take all of us. And what's so great that we see with the states, all of the states applying, is that everyone's really moving towards a space where they're getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, asking those challenging questions, trying to identify what are those barriers and being willing to think about those solutions. And the beauty of all of this is, I always say the stars are all aligned. You have the states and territories and tribal entities on board. You have funding, that's available, and you had a pandemic that amplified, all of these needs. And so what we're seeing is people truly coming together. And even if we may disagree on, different tactics and practices, what we are all aligned on is mission. And that's to ensure that every American household has access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet and the tools and resources so that they can thrive.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Move to Angela Seifer. In looking ahead, now that the money's starting to roll out, what advice would you offer the community organizations and local state leaders in developing these plans? What will it take to be successful? And if you have an example, because I know cities have done these plans before, so if you have any examples to share, that would be great as well.
Yeah, sure. So we really encourage them to talk to each other, right? Start out by figuring out who's already doing digital equity work, remembering that they're not going to call it digital equity. They're probably not going to call it digital inclusion. They might say computer trainings. They might say we're refurbishing computers. They might use a variety of descriptors for what it is that they're doing, but find them, even if it's like that one person in the church basement that offers help with devices on Tuesdays from 4 to 7, right? Like there is that just means you still have a resource. That means there's somebody already in town who sees that there's a need and sees that there's a resource that needs to be provided to the community members. So gather those folks together, start from a place of assets, right? You're not starting from nothing. It's not like our community needs all these things. Yes, they do need things, but start from a place of positivity. Yes, we are an awesome community and here's what we have. And let's then figure out what our gaps are. And we're going to fill those in with some of the folks that are already doing it, right? So being able to scale programs that already exist and then bring in the programs where it's missing. But I think it's that connecting to each other and talking to each other is how we're going to move this forward. And it's also then finding the partners for this long-term work. Because the other part that's a little bit scary to talk about, but I feel like we need to do it, is we're not actually going to solve the digital divide. I don't know if anybody wants to say that out loud to the Biden administration, but we're going to make amazing gains. We're going to like do really important work and we're going to learn lots of great things. But then we have to figure out how to keep it going because the technology is going to keep changing, which is going to keep confusing all of us. And unless somebody has some magic bullet, I don't know how we're going to solve inequity in this country or in anywhere in the world, really. So since those two things are going to keep happening, we're going to have to keep figuring out how do we help folks learn the next new technology? How do we help folks have the right device? How do we help folks make sure that they can afford connectivity at home and that they know how to use it? So because that's going to continue on, having the conversations about, yes, let's do some amazing things right now, but at the same point, let's figure out how to set up systems so that this will move forward. And a lot of times those systems come from partnerships, because we have to find resources in places we may not have looked for resources in order to keep the work going.
Thank you. And you bring about a very interesting point about the digital divide being nuanced and ever changing. And the way we define digital divide today may not stand in 5 years. And I guess the discussion around that is always, when we create these plans, does it make sense to make them living, breathing documents that will evolve with time and so that they remain relevant and we look towards the future? And this is my pet peeve. I would like to mention, we cannot future-proof technology. That word aggravates me. You cannot future-proof because it gives a sense of we can solve it, right? We have to be open to evolution. So I appreciate your point, Angela. So I wanted to go back to ACP a little bit. ACP, obviously, we can't begin to talk about digital skilling until people actually have access to connectivity. And so that makes it really important. John, you recently did a study on ACP enrollment by county to determine how well communities were positioned to take advantage of funding to promote digital equity. What were your key findings in this study, and what can communities and states looking to use funding to advance digital equity learn from this?
Sure, happy to talk about this and point out that this work was sort of a 1.0 effort at doing some analysis of ACP enrollment. I'm working with Hernan Galperin at USC and Brian Whitaker at Oklahoma State on a version 2.0. So I do want to cite my collaborators on this project going forward. The motivation for looking at ACP enrollment rates and performance in specific geographies came from this observation. When you look in any given city, you can look at the ACP data and you can look at zip codes that have very similar demographic and economic profiles, yet very different rates of ACP enrollment. And so my puzzle that I was trying to solve was, why is that? Why do places that look pretty similar have very different ACP enrollment rates? And came away with a couple of findings that I think are relevant to practitioners. One is rely on community anchor institutions. Not really necessarily breaking news on that, but places with public libraries perform better with ACP enrollment than places without public libraries, and other anchor institutions can be brought into that mix. The other point is that outreach works and that existing community assets make a difference. I talked to my friends in Cleveland who mentioned to me that they targeted by zip code certain areas with advertising and outreach. So I looked at those areas, and sure enough, they were doing much better with ACP enrollment than places without. I should say overall, Cleveland is a city doing pretty well with ACP enrollment, but places that got the outreach were doing even better. In my own city of Baltimore, I'm aware of neighborhoods that have had some significant investment in trying to deal with abandoned homes, try to basically overall increase a level of social capital in these communities through investments from local philanthropy, et cetera. And they are doing better with ACP enrollment. So there's a way to match the asset mapping with ACP enrollment that I think communities should look at. Places with assets that can affect positive change in a community can be conduits to ACP enrollment. And the data shows that these strategies can be effective. So going to be doing more analysis on this, but I think those are the important takeaways on ACP enrollment.
Thank you so much. Well, your study really validates what we knew, what we suspected at least, that outreach works, meeting people where they are with local outreach and having community anchor institutions involved is critical for the success. And so on that note, I'm going to go back to you, Rashawn. The FCC has rightfully prioritized supporting outreach and awareness activities for ACP. Can you talk a little bit about the ACP Toolkit that you all put together? Who can access it, and where can we find it? What does it include?
Sure. So thank you for that. As the Commission has previously acknowledged, and many of the panelists and attendees are well aware, there's still a need for more outreach to raise awareness of and encourage participation in the Affordable Connectivity Program amongst eligible households. The FCC understands that local trusted partners are best positioned to raise awareness in their communities, kind of along the lines of what John was saying. And with that in mind, we've created a number of easy-to-use materials for partners and others. These tools are free to use, they're downloadable, and they're customizable. And we'll be circulating a link at the end that will have the exact link where you can access all of these materials, but they are available on the FCC's website. These materials are available in English, Spanish, and 10 other languages. The FCC can print these items and mail them to outreach partners across the country upon request. And the FCC is continuing, while we have a lot of robust materials on the website, we're continuing to expand and build out on these materials. We also maintain an ACP partner email list, and if people aren't aware on that, the link that we circulate about that as well will also contain information about how organizations or individuals can join the ACP partner email list. Some of the materials available on the FCC's website include social media materials, such as social media images, logos, draft posts, newsletter inserts. We also have printables, such as flyers, fact sheets, cards, posters, handouts. We have videos and PSAs. And in addition, we have specific resources with specific topics. For example, we have some materials with a back to school theme. We have resources that are specifically focused on the enhanced tribal benefit. And then we have resources specifically for government partners and others that administer the underlying qualifying benefits programs. And I do also want to highlight that the FCC has also been very active in conducting extensive outreach concerning the Affordable Connectivity Program. And between November 2021 and August 2022, the FCC has completed 545 presentations, discussions, train the trainer events, virtual town halls, and briefings, and our outreach efforts are ongoing.
Thank you so much. Last month, the FCC also adopted the ACP Outreach Grant Program and the Your Home, Your Internet pilot program. Can you give us an overview of those programs and the next steps for the communities?
Sure. So the Outreach Grant Program, as you noted, the FCC established that program in August of 2022. That program will provide selected eligible governmental and non-governmental entities funding to conduct outreach to increase awareness of and encourage participation in the Affordable Connectivity Program among eligible low-income households. The outreach grant program is actually one of the first grant programs that the FCC is ever going to run. The application window for the grant program is not yet open. I know that's critical information, and we do get a lot of calls from people saying, is it ready? Are you ready for us to apply yet? Additional information outlining the application process, application window, and program requirements will be announced in a notice of funding opportunity, and we're anticipating a fall NOFO release. The outreach grant program will support a wide range of activities, including but not limited to in-person events, literature campaigns, digital campaigns, and paid media campaigns to provide meaningful, effective, affordable connectivity program outreach tailored to targeted communities. Just in the August order, it outlined the following funding amounts for the outreach grant program. There's $60 million for general competitive grant allocation, which includes up to $27 million for minimum allocations to eligible entities in each state, DC, and the US territories. $10 million will be set aside for tribal outreach. Up to $5 million will be set aside for participants in the the ACP Navigator pilot, and also in the Your Home, Your Internet pilot, both of which I will discuss next. In terms of the Your Home, Your Internet pilot program, which was also established in August of 2022, the goal of this pilot is to increase awareness of the Affordable Connectivity Program among federal housing assistance recipients and facilitate enrollment in the program by coupling targeted outreach with hands-on application assistance. This pilot program will be open to state and local housing authorities, tribal designated housing entities, other state, regional, or local government entities, and community partners. The application window for this pilot program also is not open yet. Additional information about the application window and application process is forthcoming and will also be available on the FCC's website. Through this pilot program, selected participants will have limited access to the National Verifier, which is the system that uses automated database connections to verify applicant eligibility, and will also provide that access to application assistants or navigators to help federal housing assistance recipients apply for the ACP benefit. Pilot participants will be invited to propose application assistant tools and to test their effectiveness in the pilot, which the commission will evaluate, and pilot participants or pilot applicants will be able to submit proposals for specialized ACP outreach materials, including promotion materials that are directed to federal housing assistance recipients and organizations. And I think, Heather, while you mentioned the Your Home, Your Internet pilot and the outreach grant program, also wanted to highlight the ACP Navigator pilot program, which was also, this was established in January of 2022, but we have not yet opened the application period or process yet for this program. And through this pilot, the FCC would provide selected participants access to the National Verifier for purposes of helping applicants complete and submit their application. This pilot program will be open to public schools, public school districts, and local, state, or tribal government entities. Nonprofit organizations are not eligible to apply for the ACP Navigator pilot program. However, neutral nonprofit organizations may partner with organizations selected to participate in that pilot, and those partnerships must be disclosed to the FCC. As I mentioned, the application window for this pilot program is not yet open, and additional information about the application window and application process is forthcoming and will be available on the FCC's website. And as I noted, while we have these two pilot program opportunities, which are separate from the outreach grant program, there is some money that has been set aside in the outreach grant program order specifically for participants in these two pilot programs.
Thank you so much, Sean. So it really makes sense for, especially for our town hall meeting, to understand that practitioners for digital literacy training and digital skilling are also good candidates for applying for funding for outreach activity, because as the data shows, those places make sense to elevate outreach activities. So thank you so much for sharing that information. And just to add, outreach and awareness for ACP can be a funded activity in the DEA application as well. On that note, I'm going to go back to you, Angela. Angela, according to the NOFO, next week is when the NTIA will begin releasing planning money for DEA. What what can organizations do to support the process, and who can they reach out to in order to be part of the process?
As I mentioned, they should be reaching out to their states, their state broadband offices, and making sure that, their voices are heard, and inviting the state offices to their communities to, kind of share what their challenges are, share the great work that's happening. We're also at NTIA visiting communities, and, what we know and what we're continuing to confirm is that a lot of, our communities are doing the work with very limited resources, and have been able to accomplish a great amount with those limited resources. So, bringing additional resources to those communities really will be able to, help lift up their work. Communities can also reach out to us. As I mentioned earlier, NTIA, we do have state federal program officers, and one of their charges is to work with local communities. And then October 3rd through 7th is Digital Inclusion Week. Yay. And we are, working with NDIA, and all of our state FPOs are going to be actively involved in Digital Inclusion Week and reaching out and working with communities that already have events planned. And we will be doing a really big push to do outreach and engagement during that week, and it will continue, on. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So Catherine, in preparation for the meeting, the town hall meeting, are there any best practices you can share for the benefit of other states that are worth considering, primarily related to digital literacy and skilling, given that you all have an office that has been focused on this for a while?
Yeah, I don't know if they're best practices, but there are things we are working on and trying to continue to build from. So I just want to +1 a lot of what was shared already about reaching out to those local partners that are already doing this work, that are on the ground and have been filling the gap to the best of their abilities without funding directed towards this. So we're really excited to be able to tap into their expertise and build a plan that allows us to fund those efforts and make them sustainable. I think one of the biggest things we're trying to pay attention to is all of the resources that were put out during the pandemic, with so many device loan and distribution processes put out, different hotlines for digital skill development and technical resources. We want to make sure that those that are working are sustainable and are things that live on after ARPA funding runs out and other state funding might run out. And we see such a huge opportunity with the implementation of the state plans over the next 5 years. So we are working to engage all of our local thought partners and leaders. We were lucky to have a committee on digital literacy and inclusion that has been in place for about a year, where we were engaging a lot of those partners at the local level. Denver in particular has a digital equity coalition that's been doing this work for years. And so we're learning a lot from what they've invested in and how they're thinking about this work for a metro area. Colorado, like many other states, has sort of that rural and urban dynamic where, not everything that works in rural areas will work in metro areas and vice versa. So we are hitting the road and doing listening sessions and leveraging our partners and local workforce boards in rural areas to understand what is in place already and what resources we can build on. The other thing I think that has been really important for us as we're setting out on this path is thinking about digital equity from that systems level and then from that individual level. A lot of the resources that the state can put out puts a lot of requirements and responsibility on the part of the individual to access resources without often taking a hard look at how we are making our resources more accessible. I think a big example of that was, with applying for benefits during the pandemic and having to do a lot of that online, and the other resources that had to be put in place to support those who didn't feel comfortable being online or didn't have access. So we're also lucky in Colorado to have some legislation that's focused on, public service website accessibility for people with disabilities. We have an effort through our governor's office called Reimagine State Government that's looking at how we make more services virtual. And so what we're doing is looking at those and making sure that we have that digital equity lens applied to those, so that we're making sure that we have a sort of both and approach and not move everything online when not everyone is online or can be online. So I would say that's one of the things that we're proud to be doing. Don't have all the answers yet, but is something that we're being really intentional about with the state plan. Other than that, I think we have being housed in the Department of Labor and Employment and partnering with our Office of eHealth Innovation, we're trying to think about those anchor institutions and those existing leaders in the community, even if they're not doing digital equity work already, but have that community-based location and the trust of the community, and thinking about where we can then embed digital literacy and inclusion resources. So looking at rural healthcare providers, looking at the divisions of vocational rehabilitation, and building on, of course, the libraries who are already doing this work. So we're trying to identify where there are those trusted centers that we can embed resources into and share resources with. And then lastly, part of our plans for the plan is to really look at those interventions that are already in place and sort of rapidly prototype and assess how those interventions are working, so that we can see which ones might be the most promising to scale with implementation dollars. So we've been doing various digital tool pilots with tools like North Star Digital Literacy and Engine to see where these digital tools can help make services and training and education more accessible for English language learners, for those that are limited in their digital literacy skills. So we're trying to assess which tools are most promising, and then be able to invest strategically in those. So I think those are a few of the key things we're working on. But yeah, just definitely reaching out to a lot of other states and really trying to learn from everyone as we all go down this path together. And I'll say too, to your earlier point around future proofing, with the Office of the Future of Work, a lot of people were talking about future proofing when it was first started. So I totally agree with your critique on that. And we often say, future ready, because you can't ever be future proof, and you shouldn't be, because that you're keeping it away. So yeah, future ready is how we get around that.
Thank you. I will scratch out everybody that sends me an email and replace it with future ready from now on. Thank you so much for that one. That makes me happy. Angela, a final question for you, and you sort of answered this question a little bit in your previous comment, but I'm going to ask it the way that the working group asked me to ask it. So, how do we leverage the $2.75 billion into much more, including support and funding for corporations and foundations to create lasting change? What does sustainability look like?
Yeah, I think part of that is helping all of those organizations, those entities, understand the value to them. So yes, this is the right thing to do for society, but it's also the right thing to do for corporations and philanthropy, because it helps them meet their other goals, right? So if it's philanthropy, what are your missions? What are the things you want to change in your communities? Technology is wrapped through it, whether you intended it to be wrapped through it or not. It is. So, in order to reach those goals, you should also address digital equity. Corporations do want folks to participate as workforce, as customers. All of that requires that access to technology and ability to use it. So there's a bottom line kind of question that it would be helpful for those folks to understand. And part of what will happen during these planning processes, and then during the implementation of this amazing investment that we have coming, is that some of that awareness should happen, right? Because if we're really doing stakeholder engagement, or we're really inviting everybody, there should be a lot of learning that goes on to recognize the impact on their own selves and their communities and their businesses.
Oh, great. Same question for you, John. How can we leverage this money, including private money as well, for lasting change?
Metrics, metrics, metrics. And that just builds off of what Angela had just said. If you're going to try to convey the value proposition to doing this work, you have to build in metrics from the get-go to tell people what the impact is. When these monies expire, to sustain these undertakings will require partnerships, engagement with local philanthropy. They will be asking these questions about metrics. So building those in from the get-go makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, metrics, measure, measure, measure. So we are almost at the end of our discussion, and now we will open up for questions. And I think my last email said that we didn't have any questions from the public. Is that still? I do have one question, and the question was for Rashawn. Did you say the NOFO for the outreach money is coming out in the fall?
Yes, correct. Sometime this fall.
Okay, sometime. Yes, confirmed. The fall. Jamila, any other questions from the public?
Not at present, Heather.
Not
You
at
all
present.
are doing such a great job. But one of our CEDC members, Sherman Kizart, has a question. So Sherman, feel free to come on camera and open up your microphone and ask your question. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jamila, and good afternoon, everyone. My question is for is directed at the government agency that's managing the Affordable Connectivity Program. What I understood was that there was going to be paid media outreach as part of the Affordable Connectivity Program. Is that actually happening? And can we talk about the status of that outreach? Because part of what I've heard in the joint meetings between the White House and the FCC was that there was a focus on getting that message out through trusted voices in our communities. And I've heard to talk about it, but and that part of that would encompass paid media. So if you could talk about that, if you would, please.
Sure. So paid media is definitely something that is contemplated in the Infrastructure Act that, you know, the FCC can conduct and engage in. The FCC is committed to using all the tools that are available to us for promoting the Affordable Connectivity Program. I can't speak to the specific status of those efforts. I do not work in the organization that actually does the outreach, so I cannot speak to the status of those efforts. But again, just, you know, stressing that paid media is something that was envisioned in the Infrastructure Act, and that the FCC is committed to using all the available tools to conduct outreach for the Affordable Connectivity Program.
Thank you. I believe our Vice Chair, Susan Allen, has a question. Susan, please jump on camera and go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, diverse opinion and contribution. Rashawn and also Angela from NDIA, you gave us a lot of information, dates and events, and I tried to write notes down as much as I could. I'm just wondering, with all that rich information, you could provide us with some bullet points on certain things. You don't have to give us the exact dates, so that we can send it out to our community, because they are the hardest thing, that has been articulated here today, is our ability to get the information out to the community. Getting information, from my experience running our organization on a full-time basis for the last 15 years, is that they have difficulty accessing information first, the relevant information on a timely basis. Secondly, to whom they should talk to. So we can start now from today, get some of that, and then we can create some awareness of the outreach. And then we can begin to think about metrics. Yes, impact, the impact statement of all the money that will be spent. We can do something with our folks and get the feedback from them. Especially Angela, you talk about some of the information that you shared today. I couldn't even put them all back together into the bottle. So you can shake it out a little bit like the pepper shaker and send it out to us. That would be great, wonderful.
Thank you, Susan. We will share websites, and I think the working group will have a compilation of information to share with participants. And to panelists, please do send us any supporting material from this discussion so we can share it and memorialize it. So I think that we are going to go ahead and I'm going to open it up for closing statements. So I'm just going to go around what I'm looking at my screen and start with Angela Bennett. If you would like to offer some closing comments, particularly aimed towards our town hall meeting that's about to begin at 2 o'clock.
Okay. I guess what I will say is that it's important for us, even as we're moving out of the pandemic into this new sense of normalcy, in living within the pandemic, that we don't lose the sense of urgency in getting out to our communities. But it's also, while we're maintaining that sense of urgency, recognizing that we have to balance that with the time to plan so that we are inclusive of our communities that have been left out and left behind. So as you prepare for the town hall, encouraging communities to reach out to us. We will be publishing on our Internet for All website the contact information for all of our state federal program officers, so that we will be accessible. Because one of the challenges for communities when we tell them to, get a seat at the planning table, they often don't know where the planning table is. And so it's a hunt first. And so we're trying to remove the barriers so that the community can be active, participants, so that they can co-design these solutions. And so thank you so much for having me as well.
Thank you so much, Angela. And John, for your closing comment.
I will share my pet peeve, which is when people say, let's look at digital inclusion programs and scale them. I'm a seed guy, not a scale guy, which is to say, look into your communities, see where there are good models, seed other parts of the community with those models and help them grow. To me, scaling connotes top-down approach. And so I like the word seed as a way of really emphasizing the bottom-up nature of that. So that's my closing thought, sharing my pet peeve.
Thank you. At least I'm not the only one sharing a pet peeve today. Angela, see for the closing comments for our town hall audience.
I just welcome anyone who's working on these issues to join NDIA. It's free. We're a 501c3. It's a place to connect, digitalinclusion.org. And we have Digital Inclusion Week, as Angie mentioned earlier, October 4th through the 7th. That's a great way to engage and learn from others, because you can do a lot online, or you can choose to do an event in person. And our annual conference is coming up in February 2023.
Okay, thank you so much, Angela. And Catherine, closing comments?
Yeah, just thank you again so much for the opportunity to participate. I'm definitely going to update my language, John, so appreciate that. I really like the term seeding, and I mean, that does have much better connotations. So thank you for that. Happy to have that takeaway. And I think for me, just really want to make sure that we're all ambassadors for this work and continue to talk. I think there are still so many assumptions people have about who has digital skills they need and who doesn't, when this is something that we all need to have as part of our own plan for our careers and our learning, that every employer needs to invest in and think really critically about. And so I think there's still a lot of language of like, how do we help those that are disconnected without also acknowledging the fact that I had to learn a lot of digital skills during the pandemic, I'm going to continue to have to learn. And so we'll only be as successful as the actual infrastructure and systems we build to make sure that we have the opportunity to continue to learn as technology keeps changing. So really excited again for the work ahead and appreciative of all the work of everyone on this panel. Like I said, we benefited from it a lot in Colorado and look forward to continuing to work with everyone.
Thank you so much. Rayshawn, any closing comments?
Sure. I think I just want to stress that, many hands are still needed to continue to support the success of the Affordable Connectivity Program. And I encourage everyone, when we circulate the links, to access and use the FCC's outreach materials, and also to be on the lookout for additional information that will be released concerning the pilot programs as well as the outreach grant program. And we definitely have an interest in seeing broad participation in all of those programs.
Okay, well, thank you. I believe Sally was multitasking. Sally, are you still on? She is ready to roll. She's doing meetings and participating in meetings. That's amazing. So thank you, panelists, subject matter experts. Thank you for your leadership in this area. Thank you for your continued passion for this work and the work that you are about to do for the next year or so in planning. That the work doesn't stop today. I know once the money gets into the communities, a year seems like a long time for planning, but it's not. And so I'm excited to continue to interact with you all, and please continue to share information with the CEDC, and we are happy to share it with our audience as well. So, and now I am going to wrap up this segment of our meeting today. We are going to take a break, and we will return promptly at 2 o'clock for the town hall meeting. And when you return at 2 o'clock, you will meet the Innovation Access Working Group Chair. That's Robert Brooks, who's responsible for really leading and guiding the working group to where we are today. And he will introduce the moderators and introduce the activities for the town hall segment. Again, thank you so much to our panelists. We appreciate your time. I know you all are very busy right now, but I know you understand this was a very important discussion. And so Jamila, Jeff, I think we are good to wrap this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you so much to all the panelists. We'll be right back at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming back and being with us for the second half of our Digital Skills Gap Symposium and Town Hall. My name is Robert Brooks. I am the chair for the Working Group Innovation and Access. And this morning, before we continue to the Town Hall, I want to thank everyone that was part of the first half of this, that made such a great conversation. That includes our DFO, the designated federal officer, Demila Best Johnson, Susan Allen, our CEDC Vice Chair, our CEDC Chair and Moderator for the Symposium, Heather Gate, our keynote address speaker, who was the former acting FCC Chairwoman, Mignon, Clyburn, and all of our panelists and the information they shared with us. They provided us a lot of insight as to the efforts they are doing and putting in place to push things forward with broadband access, and just opportunities for individuals and organizations to get more involved and take advantage of what they're able to provide. The town hall that we're about to transition into is talking about this similar conversation, but from a different perspective. The individuals you'll be hearing from come from a diverse background of expertise. And these are the individuals that are the previous panel were referencing in terms of those who are kind of boots on the ground in the community, working to make the things happen and help get that access expanded and can share things from their perspective as to, and will be sharing things from their perspective as to what they've been doing and what can be done to encourage and increase the success of this effort as we go forward. With that said, I'd like to introduce the moderators for this. Dr. Diane Lynch, who is the president of Stevens College. Leticia Latino Vance Bletterin, who is the president and CEO of Netuno USA Corporation. And the work stream chair, who oversaw this entire execution, Matthew Bauer, who is the VP of Connected Communities at WRC.
Thank you, Robert.
Greetings. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert, for your kind introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you all for being here. Our town hall meeting today maintains our focus on increasing digital equity and closing the digital gap in every community in our country. We have brought together a remarkable and diverse group of experienced and insightful experts who are doing the work on the ground. We've asked them to share their best thinking and lessons learned about the opportunities and challenges we face in meeting our shared goals. We have about 90 minutes for this session, and we've divided it up into a series of topics, from what works and what doesn't, to ensuring that we remain laser focused on the centrality of diversity and equity in every initiative we undertake. We hope this will be an inspiring, informative, and dynamic discussion, and that every person in attendance will leave the event with new insights, a new idea, a new colleague, and a more informed perspective. Takeaways we hope you will all share with your networks and colleagues. I'd like to ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves and to briefly share a little bit about their current work in the areas of digital equity and upskilling. When I call on you, please turn on your microphone and camera while you speak, and then turn them off again while others introduce themselves. Once we've met everybody, we'll open up the discussion and ask you to turn your cameras back on. So let us begin introducing this remarkable and extraordinary group of committed and passionate professionals. Susan Corbett, founder of the National Digital Equity Center, Innovation and Access Working Group member.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me this afternoon. My name is Susan Corbett. I am the Executive Director of the National Digital Equity Center. The National Digital Equity Center has a mission of closing the digital divide in the state of Maine and across the United States. We do that by promoting digital inclusion efforts, affordable broadband, affordable equipment, digital skills training, and public computer access. I look forward to meeting with all of you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Dr. John Gant, the Dean of the School of Library and Information Sciences at North Carolina Central University and a member of the Digital Empowerment and Inclusion Working Group. Hi, John.
Hi, well, good afternoon, everyone, and really look forward to our town hall discussion and really enjoyed the first part as well. I serve as the Dean of the School of Library and Information Sciences at North Carolina Central University, and we're the only HBCU in the country that has an accredited program in library science. We also offer a degree in information science, and prior to this, I founded the Center for Digital Inclusion at the University of Illinois, and I've done a lot of work on the front lines of building broadband networks to serve underserved communities, as well as developing digital literacy programs and so forth, and focus really on upskilling and skilling our workforce, both across our community and across the country as well, too. So I look forward to today's conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, John. The purpose here in terms of our introductions is, yes, so that we put names to faces, but also so at the end of these intros, we have a sense of the richness and depth of the experience of the people who are going to be having the conversation this afternoon. Carrie Gray, the Digital Equity Program Director of the Community Tech Network.
Hi, good to see you all. So the Community Tech Network works with local, regional, and national partners to provide in-person and virtual digital skills training directly to communities and also to support organizations that want to provide those digital skills training themselves. So I talk a lot. We're one of the founding members of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And so I talk a lot about partnerships and collaborations and listening to communities. So I look forward to participating in our town hall today.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrie. Allison Grubbs, who's the director of the Broward County Libraries Division in the state of Florida.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. So as a representative of South Florida and public libraries, I am here to really speak to our efforts to bridge the digital divide in an urban setting. We typically think of the digital divide strictly in rural communities, but it is quite high in wealthier urban areas as well. Broward County, along with our neighbors, Miami-Dade County and Palm Beach, we have roughly 50% broadband access in our households, and that's not good enough for us. So I'm here today to speak to you about our efforts to bridge that gap, build skills and competencies, and help people live their best lives.
Great goals. And we heard this morning how incredibly important libraries are in our communities and in undertaking this work. So thank you. We're delighted to have you with us. So Elizabeth Gillum, the digital navigator for SOAR Kentucky. Is Elizabeth with us? Okay, well, we'll circle back. Erica Hixson, North Carolina Program Director for Digital Bridge Wireless Research Center.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Hixson, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I am serving as North Carolina Program Director of Digital Bridge for WRC. And just a little bit about my background. I come from 30 years of technical experience in such fields as IT, semiconductor, quality and failure analysis, and also education and technical management and electronic technology. At Digital Bridge, we just opened our first hub earlier this year, which is strongly supported by the town of Wake Forest, by the American Rescue Plan funding. And we've launched additional hubs as well. So our goal is to continue to open up hubs across the state and in other locations. Within Digital Bridge, our hubs are focused on providing training, technology, and support to communities we serve to improve opportunities for higher paying jobs, entrepreneurship, and everyday digital skills. So our goal is to meet people where they are, serve underserved communities, reaching their digital skill goals. And our job isn't complete until people in the community and surrounding communities have jobs, the skills and confidence to use technology independently. And using skills confidently is what really matters. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I think we're going to hear a lot about meeting people where they are and employment, that at the end of this process is that goal of employment and satisfying and enriching careers. So thank you so much. Kurat Kaliba, who's the Strategic Director for Employer-Aligned Credential Programs at the Lumina Foundation.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm Kermit Kaliba, and I'm here representing Lumina Foundation. Lumina Foundation is the nation's largest private foundation focused exclusively on post-high school education and training. We're probably best known nationally for our national attainment goal, where we're seeking an America where 60% of adults have some form of post-secondary degree or other recognized credential by the year 2025. So as a foundation, we make grants to states, to institutions of higher education, and other stakeholders that are intended to advance policies and practices that support that goal. We're particularly focused in our work on addressing racial disparities in post-secondary attainment. We know that Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous learners are less likely than their white counterparts to have degrees or credentials, and as a result are less likely to have access to economic opportunities and career advancement. And so everything that we do is focused on seeking to advance opportunities for BIPOC learners. And digital literacy, of course, is a critical component of learning and education in the 21st century. So we're looking at ways to help support communities as they build in this space. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here. Alonzo Melendez, Digital Equity and Inclusion Coordinator of the Multnomah County Library in Portland, Oregon.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Alonso Melendez. I do work for Multnomah County Library as the Digital Equity and Inclusion Coordinator. And what the Multnomah County Library has been doing, and it's been doing for some time, is providing internet service and access to computers to the community. Currently, we're running a program I have the privilege, the luxury, the honor to manage is our tech lending program. We lend out devices for 6 months at a time. That includes Chromebooks and hotspots with unlimited data, prioritizing BIPOC communities and focused on low-income communities. So that's one of the things that we get to do, but we also provide mobile computer classes and mobile computer labs. So I get to go out to the community and provide access to folks and classes in the community, also meeting people where they're at and doing it also culturally and linguistically as responsive as possible. So we do have multiple folks from different communities that help provide classes as well.
Great, busy.
Yes.
Busy. And the work's just getting started. Thank you so much. Appreciate it so much. Pamela Price is the Deputy Director of BOM in Gilead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having us be a part of this conversation in Town Hall today. So I am Pamela Price. I'm the Deputy Director here at the BOM in Gilead. For 34 years, almost 34 years now, this organization has been working to be a bridge between our faith communities and public health, or the issues that really impact African American and other minority communities. So really at that crux and that intersection of culture, across policies, across systems, across different environments, and really using the faith vehicle as a way to both educate, as a way to raise awareness, as a way to mobilize these communities around central issues that our communities are facing. And obviously, like our conversation today around digital equity is a huge, huge issue and challenge. Our ability to be able to not only have jobs, but to attain the education that we need for those jobs, to access healthcare that we need, our ability to be able to have access to utilize it and have the skills is critical to us to be able to meet those markers to really, kind of have a full life. So that's what a lot of our work hinges on. And so really happy to be a part of the conversation today.
That's so terrific. We've talked a lot about faith communities as being one of those trusted community resources. So we'll be looking forward to hearing more of your thoughts on that. Andrew Tien, the Public Sector Partnerships and Customer Success Director at Coursera.
Thanks, Diane. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. As Diane was mentioning, what customer success in that area means working across our 30 local, state, and government partners and growing to help to make sure everybody's been mentioning, meeting the learners where they're at. And so Coursera is a online learning and training platform. We reach 107 million learners, and increasingly that is through our several thousand business, higher ed, and workforce partners. And so digital skills, two sides that I'll mention and we'll talk more. We know that these skills are in need by employers. We also know that the jobs of the digital economy are ones that pay higher wages. So how can we at scale help to upskill in these areas? I think another thing that we're working on too, especially with the Digital Equity Act, is how to, through our partnerships, reach more, create playbooks for this once-in-a-lifetime funding. And also acknowledging, importantly, while we do look at very much focus on underserved learners, those who are not who are non-traditional, that there's probably more on-ramps we need to create for people to learn and work and engage on Coursera. So that's a thing, and we're working on, excited to connect with all of those who are doing similar work.
Terrific. So we're also going to talk about scale. How do you scale these efforts when you meet people where they are? And how I'd love to hear from Coursera, because you probably know a lot about how you get your learners to persist. So they can start, but then how do we help them complete? Because I know Coursera is challenged with that, right? Yeah. But so too, so too are the rest of our educators. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Andrew. Dr. Harold Trulier, the Associate Professor of Applied Theology at Howard University School of Divinity, National Director of Healing Communities.
Good morning and good afternoon, rather. It's morning somewhere, and glad to be with you all today. One of the things that I focus on at Howard University is the intersection between faith and the criminal justice system. And to that end, I direct a national project called Healing Communities USA, which trains faith communities to assist in reentry and family reunification. As such, we're helping these congregations working with men and women who are coming home from prison and who are deeply affected by virtue of poverty and very often race by the digital divide. So we are now partnering with Sampson Jefferson Associates, a not-for-profit here in Maryland, not far from Washington, where we will be working with them to do computer training skills through the congregations. And we believe the congregations are an important component of this, because job readiness is not simply a matter of technical skills, but it's also soft skills. And for people coming home from prison, a critical employment skill is having a support network, and a support network that supports the change in ideas and changes in mind. So it's the resources of the faith community, the resources of digital training, putting people in a position to be good citizens and good employees.
That's terrific. Can't wait to hear more about that. What a combination, a collaboration of resources and services. So thank you. Joseph Balandra, Senior Vice President of Tribal Communications.
I'm sorry, I was having a small technical difficulty. I'm very pleased to be part of this afternoon. I'm Joe Balandra. I'm a member of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe from South Dakota. I'm also Vice President of Tribal Communications. We're working with tribal nations across the country in all 50 states, really, we have a more fundamental problem in the Indian country, in that there's very little connectivity. So it isn't just a question of adoption and devices, although that's a big part of things. It's actually getting a viable connection to those communities. But as we all know, with those communities comes better economic development, better health care, and better education. And this is particularly true for Native communities. And one thing that we're doing, recognizing that there's a shortage of trained workers across the telecommunication industry, we partnered with a very established workforce development company that they've been working with service veterans for years and years, and now we're going to extend their expertise in the Indian country so we can train natives and other community members to work at home on these newly established networks. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this today.
Glad to have you. Exciting work. Jeff Whistle, Chief Accessibility Officer for Disability In. Hey, Jeff.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So yes, Jeff Whistle, Chief Accessibility Officer of Disability In. Disability In is a leading nonprofit organization, and we're kind of different than a lot of other nonprofits in the sense that our clients are corporate America as well as global corporations. And at Disability In, we essentially help empower corporations to achieve disability inclusion as well as accessibility. So over 72 of the Fortune 100 companies are members of Disability In. And Disability In offers lots of different programs, everything from helping companies to set up employee resource groups of all different types, executive sponsors of those employee resource groups. We have a Next Gen Leaders program where we usually have over 325, 350 college students who all have at least one self-disclosed disability in a 6-month-long mentoring program. And many of those students actually get employment, very good employment through the partner companies. We are a certifying organization for disability-owned businesses. So making sure that disability-owned businesses, majority disability-owned, have a chance to be part of the purchasing ecosystems of the Fortune 1000 companies by certifying them as disability-owned. And we work with chief diversity officers, talent and acquisition, talent and recruiting departments, and so forth, really focusing in on the disability communities and making sure that that there's equality there, as well as a meeting like this. The technology behind it to make sure that it's accessible, usable, inclusive for individuals with disabilities is definitely one of our key focuses as well. So very honored to be part of this panel.
Glad to have you here. Juliet Fink Yates, Digital Inclusion Manager, the Office of Innovation and Technology from the City of Philadelphia.
Good afternoon. I'm Juliet Fink Yates. It's a pleasure to be here. As mentioned, I'm the Digital Inclusion Manager for the City of Philadelphia. And really, in that role, it's a very exciting moment in time to be at the city or at a big city and doing this work. What we're really focused on around digital equity is we've developed a plan, a digital equity plan that captures needs around devices, internet access, and skills for work and life. And then my role is really to connect our systems, our workforce system, our adult ed system, our free library system, our parks and rec system, our education system, and have everybody think about how we can provide digital skills, how we can use similar platforms or frameworks, how we can do professional development across those systems, and work together to ensure that everybody has access to the training that they need.
Great. So much to talk about, so many things to talk about. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to circle back to see if Elizabeth Gillum, Digital Navigator from SOAR, Kentucky, has joined us.
Hello, Diane. Can you see me okay?
I can, thank you.
Awesome. So my name is Lizzie Gillum, and I am the Digital Navigator from SOAR. We're a regional nonpartisan nonprofit that champions local projects, programs, and advocacy for 54 distressed Appalachian Regional Commission mandated counties in Eastern Kentucky. My job as Digital Navigator is to bridge the literacy gap in rural communities by connecting people with ACP and Lifeline, skilling up the workforce through digital literacy courses, and helping households gain access to devices. The 6 counties we're currently working in have access to the best internet in the state, but 30% of those households don't actually have any internet access. So our plan is to connect them to better internet and attain better quality of life. We believe that digital skilling up is the future of the workforce development, and we believe that means every Eastern Kentuckian, no matter sex, age, race, income, must be digitally competent. And we're planning on working with community action agencies, libraries, and other organizations to make that possible.
Great, thank you so much. I'm glad you made it to join us. So am I missing anybody? Is there anybody here who somehow didn't make my list? Okay, terrific. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Clearly, this is going to be the kind of conversation we had hoped it would be. It's now my pleasure to turn the program over to Matt Bauer, as he was introduced, our workstream lead, fearless leader, for our first set of questions.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane. And I can say myself, I'm just wowed by this group, and I'm so thankful you all are here, and I wish we had days to talk about this, but we don't. So let's get going. As I'll just sort of lead in with a few points, and then we'll get into the first question. As CEDC Chair Heather Gate noted earlier, just to kind of set that table again, broadband access is a human right from the UN. US is ranked 29th in the global digital literacy scale. At the same time, American and global employers are struggling to fill millions of middle skill positions. And the demographics of our digital skills gap mandate that we must address equity and diversity in these actionable solutions. And I love Chairwoman Clyburn's opening. It was amazing, and we need to be bold, actionable, and she painted a few possible solutions. But what we want to hear and get from this session is what are those solutions that are working, what's not working, and so on. And let's start eliminating those analog islands that are not a resort paradise. So into our first question, let's dive in. What's the question on the table is what's going well in digital skilling, upskilling program efforts? Let's start on a positive note. Please share with us success stories, cross-sector examples. As we had just heard, the story about working with corporates and nonprofit and small businesses. There's great solutions out there. And to kick off this dialogue, I'd like to call on Susan Corbett, who has a few years of working in this area. So I think, Susan, you can give us some historical perspective, where we've been, where we are, where we're going, to help kind of set the tone here.
I can, Matt, and I think we're called seasoned at this point, right? After so many years.
Yes.
So, when the pandemic hit, we were concerned about three different groups of people. There were the students who were not able to connect to school, maybe because they couldn't afford a broadband connection or they didn't have a broadband connection. And then there were remote workers who may or may not have broadband connections, may or may not have been able to afford a broadband connection. Maybe they didn't have equipment in order to become remote workers. And then the group I lost a lot of sleep over were our older adults who were already battling isolation and loneliness, and maybe they did not have a broadband connection, and they didn't have devices, and they didn't have the skills in order to participate in our digital economy. So, our digital inclusion efforts became really, really important. At the National Digital Equity Center, we were working really hard to meet people where they were, our favorite expression for today, I think. Over the last year, we have we've enlisted other people to help us because we're just one organization and there's an awful lot of work to do, as we can hear from all of our practitioners on this call today. We started to do a partner on-site program where we could have facilitators at a location, bring out our instructors over Zoom, and be able to provide more classes across the state of Maine. The host organizations would give us offer a facilitator. The facilitator would choose classes to have at their location, sign students up, and be in the classroom with that student. I think the takeaway of that, there are many reasons why that is a really important program. One, we're able to expand our reach with the resources that we have. But more importantly, I tell everyone, it's not my job to close the digital divide. It's all of our job to close the digital divide. And bringing in partners to help us with that makes everybody takes ownership of that. So I think that's where I think that when we look at partnerships, that's what we're looking at. Who else can help us? Who else wants to help close that digital divide across the United States? So thanks, Matt.
Wow, it's a wonderful opening. Thank you, Susan. Let's go to high level just a little bit, and then I'd like to dive into some more examples of what's going on the ground. Andrew Tien, calling on you to, Coursera not only is a provider to millions and millions of learners out there, but also does this annual survey of kind of where things stand in the world, right? And just sort of hitting those notes from the survey and or what you're seeing in terms of what's working. I know the U.S. has got a lot of catching up to do. We can talk about that in the next section, which are like what's inhibiting progress or challenges. But on any high notes that you might see or that you have your hands on.
Sure. Well, I think Susan was alluding to this as well. The for all the many challenges of the pandemic, the forced migration of learning and work online has helped to grease the wheels for those of us who have been focused on digital skills training. There's just much more openness and adoption at the sort of institutions level, and also urgency, because we were seeing from employers already, and everybody's read all the surveys, right? Digital transformation driving this flywheel of skills, and impossible for learners to keep up. That only got faster and worse in terms of the half-life. This is meant to be positive, so I'm just saying more like the pieces of the puzzle were coming together because the urgent and important started to align. And I think another important thing I'd highlight is just that fact that we have a signed piece of legislation called, the Digital Equity Act, that helps to, as this meeting itself is doing, bring all the stakeholders together to work and connect in new ways. So we're seeing where the initial focus on digital transformation has only gotten faster. That has gotten into the mind space of stakeholders at the senior political and corporate levels, and that's translating into new sort of mobilization that we can now act on and bring into communities.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's get down on the ground level. I'd like to pull in a handful of you folks: Erica, Carrie, Lizzie, Allison, and then I'm going to include a few more as we go along there. But if you could all sort of jump on and let's sort of go around, in this important work that you're doing, and you're physically seeing and touching folks every day that are doing this with your services and your work. Why don't we go around in terms of what's working in terms of your programming and what's on the ground there. Carrie, why don't you start, and then Erica, and then Allison.
Well, I think something everybody has said is now many people beyond our own group of collaborators sees the need. And a lot of the programs that we support, for example, workforce development, we had seen a need for folks to be able to use their devices and connect to the internet before they could even take any training classes. And so a lot of workforce development agencies had presumed that their clients were coming in with enough digital skills to participate in training. And so now they've seen that they don't, that they may not have touched a computer. So it's a great opportunity for us. And I feel that funders, especially government funders, have a lot more, compassion for the situation. And I love seeing the support for it. But I also appreciate how different organizations, different government agencies who don't normally work together have been working together to solve this problem together. So for example, in San Francisco, we work with seniors through the Department of Disability and Aging Services, and we also work through the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development on their properties, some of which have seniors and some of which have families, and we're working with, and so we're being able to serve everybody in a community now rather than limiting it to one population or another. So that's working really well. I really appreciate that. The fact that now we have a portfolio of things we can offer them. One of the things that Allison mentioned in her introduction was, she had this list of 5 or 6 services that they offer, and we have a portfolio. We have an affordable connectivity program that we can suggest. We have subsidized internet programs. We have funding for middle mile. So yeah, that's really working, or will work, or continue to work for us.
Wonderful, thank you, Carrie. Erica.
Thank you, Matt. So what we're seeing that is working is building that collaborative partnership and relationship with corporation and groups. And some of the partnerships that Digital Bridge has built is with such companies as Microsoft, which is providing discounted systems, Cisco, which has provided network academy curriculum, and Coursera. Thank you, Andrew. Coursera, which has granted a selection of in-demand training and certification. And also AT&T, which has provided funding. And also we're working with local partners and nonprofits where we have a chance to share, information and resources. When you share resources and talent, you open the door to solutions. So we are working with such organization as Step Up Ministry, which is a nonprofit organization that annually helps hundreds of individuals in Wake County, which helps them to transform their lives through employment and life skills training. We are in the process of providing 6 weeks of training to that organization. So just having that collaboration is how we're working together. Another group that we're working with is Dress for Success. It mostly targets, is geared towards women. It is a global nonprofit organization that empowers women to achieve economic independence. And just the other day, I talked to a new Digital Bridge client, and I asked her, how did she hear about our program? And she said that she received information from an event that was given by Dress for Success. So, it's room at the table for everyone. We have similar goals and different resources, and together, we create an empire and break down the silos. Since we early opened the doors, our success story kind of starts with, opening more hubs, giving opportunities in different locations, and you partner with different organizations to do that. We have a hub that we're opening up in Wilmington, North Carolina, and that's the support of the city, but it is also, we're partnering with Step Up Wilmington, and we have other partnerships that we are working with. So that seems to be working a lot, just to, it takes a village to do this. So it's like if we all can come together, we create that empire of getting the job done.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Erica. Allison.
So as mentioned, one of the benefits of the pandemic is that there is a growing recognition that devices alone or internet alone does not bridge the digital gap, right? There needs to be a baseline of skills, competencies, knowledge on how to actually utilize these devices. And one of the things that, while I'm sure all of us were aware of well before the pandemic, but as a result of it, that technology is such an incredible tool to reduce social isolation. And that was something that we really recognized when people were either quarantined at home, working from home. Our senior citizen cohort were really missing out on familiar social interactions that really lead to an improved life. And so that's something that we have really worked hard. So we've had a program for years and years, and it's our grandparents program at the library where they could come and help children with their reading skills. And how are we able to pivot so that they could continue helping younger generations improve their literacy digitally, right? Digital literacy is definitely a focus of ours, and partnering with wonderful community partners to stakeholders as well to address these needs, that some of them are just so fundamental that it goes beyond needing a device in your hand, but it's that how do you make a meaningful connection and improve your social network and really feel that your world is secure in a very insecure age, right? And now we're seeing all of these articles about inflation and recessions and interest rates, and how are we tying this into, again, security in the digital world. It all ties together. And so as a community anchor in our neighborhoods, in our cities, the public library has really, we've been stepping up for a long time. And so now we're stepping up even more. And I'm sure my colleague from Multnomah will agree with me on this, that it's so incredibly important to be able to navigate not only the internet but the device you own, so that you can make these important social connections. So that would be a kind of high level, mid-level range for us.
That's awesome, Allison. Thank you. And we will shift to, I think I'm going to change the title to not what's not working, but just more challenges that we're having out there and opportunities. But I did want to touch Dr. Trulier and Juliet as well on what's happening in your worlds. Very excited to hear about Healing Communities USA. Dr. Trulier, if you could give us a minute on what's working there and your progress with reentry folks coming out of prisons.
Well, we're focusing at Healing Communities USA on the two most critical factors of recidivism reduction, and that's a change of attitude and a social support network that supports that change of attitude. Everything else is secondary in that I can give you, let's say in this case of what we're doing now, digital skills. But if you've not made a shift in your attitude towards society, towards yourself, if you don't have a support group that's supporting you in those changes, then, well, I'm a formerly incarcerated person, and I was locked up with some very digitally talented people. So, you know, it's a matter of giving people the kinds of supports they need in making the transition back from prison into society, that supplements the kind of digital training that we're talking about. One of the challenges that we're facing, I know that this in this bridge over towards challenges, is one, just the attitude of corrections itself, because if you're dealing with a correction system that is primarily punitive and not rehabilitative, then the kinds of efforts that we're talking about are frowned upon, because, you know, it's why are we giving these people computer skills? Why are we giving them access to computers? They're bad. They should be punished. I remember when I was locked up, I was reading the book that became a movie, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and in the opening scene, the protagonist is working on his laptop, and I'm saying, wait a minute, he's in prison and he's working on a laptop? I don't have a laptop, and I didn't have computer access either. In fact, I needed computer access for work to finish some projects up that I didn't finish because I was locked up and I was denied access. And so we live in a society that wants to punish people and not rehabilitate them. And so that's one of our biggest obstacles, is getting people to see the need for rehabilitation, for redemption, and getting people back into the workforce and seeing how productive it is. And that for every dollar that we spend on education, which includes digital skills, we save $4 in reincarceration. So that's been a real challenge for us. We've seen some people come home and be very successful, but we still have a lot more work to do and a lot more attitude change to do in our culture.
That's amazing, Dr. Trulier. And I think this will come out in one of our later sessions, is, you know, digital, but the soft skills actually, and the transitional pieces, that is a river that runs through a lot of this work, because whether it's reentry or folks just getting back into work or having challenges, that is something we're hearing a lot. Juliet, Fink, Yates, love to hear more about a little deeper dive on the work you're doing, and it has some unique perspectives, I think, on this topic.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge how thankful I am that Dr. Juliet shared that information. I really want to uplift that work around remembering kind of in our communities who has access and who doesn't, and who can reach folks. And so we talk about this trusted messenger. Some of the work that we're really doing the city runs something called the Digital Literacy Alliance. It's a network of community-based partners, higher ed, our telecoms are part of it, but it's also a seed fund, and we do small grants for community-based organizations to do innovative digital literacy projects. And so during the pandemic, we launched one for digital navigators, but we also launched one for serving communities with limited immigrant communities or limited English proficiency communities, English learners, which we kept hearing was really, really struggling, isolated because of both language barriers during the pandemic and technology barriers. And so, there were some really great projects that came out of that work. We had small organization, a Cambodian organization working with Cambodian seniors, doing really innovative digital storytelling and skill-based around, safety, using digital, using their phones, but also then expanding that into other digital skills that they were learning. So really capturing the attention of what do you need? How do we help our community, a really specific community? And then once we've got you, how do we increase those skills? What are your next steps? Is it an adult ed program? Is it an ESL program? Is it a workforce program? So lifting up those small organizations that have that real focus and then bring folks into other spaces where they can get more skills. We also had an organization working with our African communities in business owners, helping them teach digital skills. So really innovative work there. And then the second thing that we've been doing as a city that I just want to mention, because we work with both large and small organizations, is we are really helping all of these organizations think about their practice around how to teach digital literacy and digital skills. And one of the things that we've done is adopted North Star as a city, which is, many folks may be familiar with it. It's called North Star Digital Literacy. It's great for those foundational skills. And so our adult ed and our workforce systems together aligned on that system. Our library uses it, our Parks and Rec uses it now. And so for the first time, we can really help folks in our smaller community-based organizations, help them use the system, demonstrate where folks are in their skills when they come to them at first, and show the progress once they've completed their programs. And that's not something we've ever been able to do as a city, to demonstrate progress over time. And I think it's a really important component to this work.
That's great perspective. Thank you, Juliet. I know we're running over time slightly for this section, but if Leticia, I'll capture back my balance in a second. I wanted to ask just one question to a small group of folks and maybe have them just do a quick hit if we can. So in terms of challenges and sort of changing it from what's not working to, if you could just list, like, in 30 seconds, like, what's your biggest challenge? Pamela, Lizzie, Alonzo, and Joe, if you could come on with us, and each of you kind of mentioned that, I think, in your opening, in terms of, Lizzie, maybe geography, Alonzo, language, Joe, in terms of getting the broadband, and Pamela, you use the term challenge in your intro. So if each one of you could just give a quick synopsis of your biggest challenge, if it comes to mind.
Sure, I'll get started to try and just be succinct as I've been listening to the other individuals speak. So we've been kind of talking about meeting people where they are. I think one of the challenges that we use where as geographically, where are people located? And we need to start to shift to say it's not just where they are geographically, it's where people are mentally, it's where they are physically, it's where they are spiritually. And it's meeting them there. And everything that kind of comes, with that and is connected to that. I think also one of the challenges is that the way our infrastructures are set up right now, which are very siloed, they typically do not have community-based, faith-based, these kind of external partners at the table. They're more external. externally based. And I think we need to start to bring more of that at the center of our decision making, of our policy, of our advocacy. And I think the third thing I would say is to really think about existing railroad tracks and how do we, again, not duplicate certain efforts, but really to look at seeing what has been built and what can we now put on top of work that other organizations have already done.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Pamela. Lizzie Gillum. Some perspective. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Pamela, I think mentally where people are is a big thing, because here in Kentucky, you've always heard that people are very clannish, people are very superstitious. And I think that's very exaggerated to an extent, but it's also true to an extent. We do have our communities and we like them small and we like what's working. So just working with trusted voices, I think, in the communities to get this information out, working with school administrators, with county judges, with librarians, especially because here in Kentucky, libraries have really become a central gathering point for the community. So working with those people and trying to overcome that a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll go Joe and then Alonzo.
All right. Well, thank you. Yes, as I said in my opening, there's sort of a fundamental challenge in Indian country, and that is just the conductivity overall. It just isn't there. On my home reservation in South Dakota, Rosebud, most of the conductivity is DSL speed at best. So to participate in a meeting like this, for example, would be almost impossible unless it was just voice. And that's just one small example. But what the influx of federal funding and other resources that are being brought to bear finally is creating another challenge for tribal governments, and that is a capacity. The expertise, the number of people, the knowledge base needed to take full advantage of the money and information and other resources flowing to Indian country is also limited. So that's one of the challenges that we at Tribal Communications are trying to overcome is provide that kind of expertise. But we're now realizing, and I've heard others say it, we're bringing in lots of partners, lots of trusted partners who have experience in other areas like workforce development, but a lot of other technical areas, so that we can try to fill in those gaps. But I would say, of all the challenges in Indian country, and there are many, but just to get this connectivity up and running and meaningful and useful, we're trying to fill those gaps of capacity right now, and that's a big challenge.
That's great perspective, Joe. And I think there are a lot of entities, right, that are, how do we do this in an equitable way? But you have to have the infrastructure to be able to deliver the, accept the funds and put them out into the field. So thank you so much for that. And Alonzo, you have the last word.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So yeah, the challenges, I'm going to kind of go work a little backwards. I'll try to make this quick and short as possible. So challenges, I think, something that was just mentioned a few seconds ago, meeting people where they're at. What does that really mean? So with the mobile libraries that we've been doing at Multnomah County Library, it's been really meeting people where they're at, giving people the chance to kind of create the programming that they need, when they need it, how they need it, where they need it, and what language they need it. So that's been great. But that was a challenge before. Now with the mobile libraries, it's not so much a challenge. Now the challenge is actually responding to the demand. So, I could do 5 classes a week and still have a wait list of people that want and need classes. Most of my classes are averaging about 10 people in a class. If I'm doing 5 a week, that's 50 people a week. And I'm still have people waiting, asking for more. So that's the challenge right now, is being able to actually provide the demand that we have. The need is there. We're not able to really address all of the needs for all the people. With our tech lending program, we have a wait list of over 100 people waiting for a hotspot. So those are some of the challenges. I think it's recognizing, or maybe not recognizing, funding all the work, all the staff that it takes to be able to provide and actually respond to the need that's there.
Excellent. Thank you, Alonzo. So now I'll hand it to my colleague, Leticia Latino. Please take it away, Leticia, and then we'll go quiet.
Thank you, Matt. Well, you're doing such a great job that you should stay with us. No. Hello, everybody. Such a pleasure to be here with you. This is a fascinating conversation. And, you know, you all have such knowledge that it's hard to even know how to let you all speak. So I want to encourage you, if you hear us talking about something and we don't call on your names, please raise your hand because we can call upon you. We don't want you not to share some valuable nuggets of wisdom if you have some to share. I want to switch gears a little bit into, you know, small businesses, because I'm a small business owner. The co-chair of the CEDC, Susan, obviously is, you know, very, very passionate about advocating for small businesses and minority-owned businesses. So I invite any of you that has any good advice, strategies of what we need to reskill and upskill the employees of such entities, of the minority-owned business. I invite you to join me by camera and share your knowledge. And I hope somebody turns on. Oh, there you are, Carrie. Hello.
Hi. So I love this question. One of the things I think it was everybody's tendency to give people digital skills based on they're going to get a job with a company. So people have training programs for Microsoft Word and Google Office Suite. And so in San Francisco, we had been training people in these kind of computer processing skills. And what we found was there were a lot of folks, especially in long-term unemployed communities, that the skills themselves weren't enough. And so we were partnering with organizations who were helping them get job search skills, but they still weren't getting jobs. And when the city of San Francisco reached out to the folks who had participated in those training programs to ask what did they need, and this goes back to, as everybody says, ask the community what they need. What they wanted to do was become online entrepreneurs. And so there are two programs that were launched. One was a program for entrepreneurs over 50 and teaching people over 50 the digital skills they would need to launch an in-person business as an entrepreneur, and also an entrepreneur program for people who specifically wanted to be an online entrepreneur, who wanted to set up an Etsy shop, an eBay shop. And these programs have been hugely successful. And it really gives a section of our population that had been excluded from employment that self-sufficiency, autonomy, and the skills they need to be in control of their own economic self-sufficiency. And so this isn't, so we're creating small businesses by helping people see that digital skills can be applied across a variety of work environments. So it's not just about, oh, I need to learn Excel spreadsheets. It's that people can see how they can become economically self-sufficient by using their digital skills.
That's great. Thank you, Carrie. I know, Joe, thanks for coming on. Let me give the word one moment to Kermit that I know that has the hand raised, and we go after with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciated this conversation so far. I've learned a lot and excited to see so much work that's happening across the country. Just a couple of quick thoughts on particularly on the role of small and medium-sized businesses. I think small and medium-sized businesses often struggle to develop training programs or to connect to training programs because in many cases, you know, they don't have a training department, they don't have an internal learning function. And so one of the strategies that we know is very effective at connecting small and medium-sized businesses to education and training is what we think of as industry or partnerships. So bringing together multiple companies connected to a local or regional industry with community colleges, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders at developing industry-wide training programs. I think that's a strategy that is fairly common in the higher education and the workforce space, but I don't know that I'm not familiar with a lot of partnerships that are really wrestling with the digital skills challenge, and I think that is something that we need to do a better job of. I'll also note we don't do a lot around incumbent worker training or career advancement training. So I know there's a lot of training is focused on getting someone into a job, and that's really important. So getting those foundational digital literacy skills that are necessary. But we also want to be focusing on how do we advance people within a company, and what are the pathways that are in that company. So thinking about partnering beyond just the entry-level training and making sure that people get access to the training that takes them from the front line to a management job. And I think that is also something that small and medium-sized businesses can sometimes struggle with, and they need help from other partners. The last point I'll make here is, I think it's really important to think of digital skills not in isolation from the job that you're training for, right? So digital skills are a part of manufacturing. Digital skills are a part of healthcare jobs. Digital skills are essential now to really do almost any job. And I think one of the things we know from the higher education space is that when it comes, we made a lot of mistakes in earlier years in how we thought about foundational literacy. So literacy and numeracy and English language acquisition. We should try to avoid making those mistakes where access to literacy programs became a barrier to access to skills training. I think one of the things we're looking for is how do we make sure that people can get digital literacy in a contextualized manner, in a way that allows them to be successful on the job without serving as sort of a stepping point to the skills training that they're interested in. So that's something that we're really looking into, is how can community colleges and other institutions of higher education make digital literacy training a part of the overall curriculum, and make sure that people are able to acquire digital literacy skills while also acquiring the other skills that they'll need in order to be successful on the job.
Wow, that's a very powerful perspective, Kevin. Thank you. Joe, we're ready for you. I'm sure that your perspective on what the tribal communities are doing is very interesting.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's really picking up on sort of the theme here, meeting people where they are. Tribal communities tend to, it's not exclusively, but they tend to be more isolated, a little more insular, geographically and culturally. And it's understanding that the overall community, the connections between the tribal community is very important. So the way that you address workforce development, training, digital literacy, all of those things have to take into account the unique culture of most tribes and tribal communities. I think that sometimes gets overlooked because it's, as others have said here, it isn't just an isolated skill set. If it can be related to how am I going to benefit not only my family and myself, but how am I going to benefit my community in what I'm learning today, will make a big difference. And that sounds fundamental, but I think it's as important in tribal communities as it is in any other ethnic or cultural community. So I really wanted to make that point. It sometimes gets lost and or gets overlooked because the rush to train is so overwhelming sometimes that cultural component gets lost. So again, it's part of meeting people where they are.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for highlighting. And well, I know we have time for one more, and this is such a great conversation that we should have had more time. But Allison, let's close this cycle with you, please.
Absolutely. So I just had a wonderful, what you were just saying about meeting people where they are psychologically and mentally. I just had a wonderful conversation with our career online high school coordinator, and she was telling me some frustrations that her team was having with individuals who were coming for literacy, just reading, tutoring, so that they could take that next step in their life. And that we have to be mindful of, if we're committed to reaching people where they are, that we need to be compassionate to their situations. Here in Broward County, we have over 40 languages being spoken. We have asylum seekers, we have refugees from various wars across the world, and often their needs for shelter, food, are going to rank more highly than their digital training. So even though they may sign up for that, they're not going to always be the most reliable in terms of attending our courses. So it's an extra level of flexibility that we have to be aware of going into these processes, and how do we adjust midstream to meet their needs when something comes up. They have to get a job and all of a sudden their schedule shifts. right? So if we're really truly committed to that point, we also have to be incredibly flexible, incredibly compassionate to those needs, and to adjusting ourselves as well for those situations.
Well, thank you so much. As a Broward County resident, I want to give you special thanks for leading us into this. So I want to pass it on. There's so many questions, but I know Matt is taking more account into what we haven't touched upon. So Matt, back to you.
Thank you, Leticia. And so I've changed what I was going to say a little bit here. We had such great comments from the panel session. And some of the highlights around, and I love the discussion around, Angela Seifer brought up the need to develop systems, need to continue. Director Doty, accessing in from the rural library, and how this work has to be community-based. And I think the most common theme of the day so far has been meeting people where they're at. And then so my question was, how do we scale this? So now I feel kind of weird saying that after the discussion of John Horgan, as he appropriately, because as a startup guy, that's what I've been doing most of my life. Scaling is a very typical term we use, but I love seeding, and I think that is a more appropriate term. So how do we seed? How do we, what is the goal of? We want to see a lot more of this, and as Angela had said earlier, we're not going to solve every problem in the world, but we can really grow this. And so the question is, how do we see this? How do we grow the work deeper into communities that exist, in existing efforts that are going on today, as well as expanding it to localities and places that don't have it? And I'd like to get Kermit back on the stage if I could, and also Dr. Gant and Jeff Whistle, if you could all join in for, and then please everyone raise your hand as you would like to come in. And if you had your hand raised before, please unraise it. But, Kermit, why don't we start with this? Lumina sits in a unique spot in terms of the sort of leading foundation that's square in this work. And so, and I know that Lumina really looks to invest in organizations that are seeding, that are growing, that there's not one, that's two, there's going to be more copies of it. How do we go deeper, go farther, and do it in an equitable way if that's something you can address?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of thoughts. One is just thinking about how we measure digital literacy and who's measuring digital literacy. And I know that there's a number of states that have started taking steps, like Hawaii and Colorado and others. There's been research from National Skills Coalition that shows states are starting to assess digital literacy and identify where their gaps are at a state level and a local level, and working to try to think through what are the strategies that we need to connect communities, particularly communities of color that have often been left behind by investments and initiatives. So I think that's one thing. I think another thing we should be thinking about is sort of how are we rewarding and incentivizing digital literacy. So you think about a lot of our funding streams, whether it's higher education funding, workforce funding, we don't really have a way of assessing whether or not you of investing in digital literacy as an outcome. And so I think thinking about how higher education institutions and other workforce providers can not only figure out how to assess digital literacy and assess progress towards digital literacy, but be rewarded for helping people get to to higher digital literacy skills. I know we had the panelists mentioning this program, the North Star, as an assessment tool. I think that's really useful. But I'll just note, for example, in the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, which is the primary federal investment at the Department of Education on adult education, we don't have a definition of digital literacy embedded in that. And so if we think about where adult literacy funds are going right now, they aren't necessarily being used to incentivize digital literacy instruction. So I think there's a couple of ways that we could start to think about expanding and incentivizing. And as I say, I think engaging, thinking about how we engage employers and how they think about digital literacy training and what does digital literacy look like in their industry. There are foundational digital literacy skills, but as I said, this shows up in different ways in different industries. And so thinking about how is digital literacy embedded in any workforce development program where you're going to be interfacing with technology or with computers, that's going to be really important. And I think we're looking for opportunities to support that work at each stage along the way.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Kermit. Dr. Gant, you have such clarity around this and so much experience in so many things, and you come at it from the library information sciences side, the HBCU, and all the different things you're involved with. Really interested to hear your thoughts on how we go deeper, wider, seed this movement at this time.
Yeah, I think the term seeding is really important as well. I think there are a lot of lessons even from BTOP, the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program, at the turn of 2009, 2010, that helps us to think about what good seeding means. If I throw on my Sunday morning preacher hat, you think about this in terms of seeding also means how good is the ground in which it's being seeded. And, there's different types of conditions that are necessary to understand. So as you're planting the seeds, So when I founded the Center for Digital Inclusion, I was at the University of Illinois. I worked closely with our extension service. And one of the things that we did was try and address that very particular question. You could have 10 different ways to drop in a digital literacy program within a community, whether urban or rural. And we worked with our extension service all across the state. And what was really awesome about working with them was the intimacy with which they knew their community. And we worked with folks to then try and understand, how do you measure that? John Horgan talked about those metrics. And so how do you systematically go in and assess the readiness of a community as well? And so one thing that we can think about from a university point of view or community college is working with your stakeholders in your community to bring the expertise that we have on campus to look at those stakeholders and assess what is the quality of the ground that you're going to be embedding these in, and then identify where the gaps are. And so the more that we can use metrics to see these gaps, the more we can really put together strategies that are co-developed with the community and have the university be a partner and industry, civil society, nonprofits, faith-based work together. So the more we can visualize that, I think makes a big difference. Second important thing is you got to remember, we have to work with the community and be of the community, not parachute in and tell folks what to do. And so I think it's important to take approaches that really embrace sort of deliberative, democratic processes that are about the ground up, getting the voice of everybody and making that part of the metrics that we're using and the approach for really visualizing and seeing it. And then thirdly, I think it's also important to say, well, okay, what other resources can we leverage from our universities, from our colleges, to really help make a difference? We've got programs from computer science, information science, library science, in education and so forth that can leverage. So how can we, build effective digital navigator programs using the university kind of as a place to incubate and develop sort of these folks, leverage our community-based mission that we have, but then do it in a way that we can learn and inform and truly be a partner in making all these things happen. And then especially that I'm a dean of a school of library and information sciences, we work with libraries on a daily basis, and we're trying to help build that capacity within the library. So how can we entrench these kinds of values, these types of skills into our curriculum so that we're training the next generation, the generation after that, of how to do these kinds of things? And we did a lot of work through grants with IMLS on how to look at developing these kinds of things. And we did a lot of work which were the early precursors to the Digital Navigator programs to try and figure out what works, what doesn't. So I think all those things together are ways that we can really make a difference. And then lastly, being at a historically black college or university, and I've got colleagues here that are part of minority serving institutions or native serving colleges and universities as well too. There's a special role that we play that I think we take what we learn in working with our communities and share that more broadly as well, because there are a lot of very specific things we've got to work through to really understand the context in which we're working, so that we can really make a difference. And I think there's a lot of work and ground that has been accomplished so far, but there's still room for us to do even more.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gant. You have a unique experience and perspective for sure, and that was wonderful. Thank you. Pamela, you have your hand up, and then we're going to finish with Jeff for this segment.
Hi, thanks so much. I wanted to piggyback a little bit about what Dr. Gant just said and kind of tie in what I mentioned earlier about, how do we scale this? How do we look at this? So, infrastructure, and then I mentioned railroad track. So the way we've kind of conceptualized this idea about utilizing railroad tracks as an organization that serves predominantly African Americans is that by really thinking that, our ancestors got to freedom via the Underground Railroad. It was not a physical railroad. It was a network. It was a community. It was an infrastructure. And so with that kind of concept in mind, the way that we've worked as an organization to scale, everything from, health literacy to, health education, awareness, and including, in this digital equity space about the issues around not just access to broadband and to devices, but also how do we utilize them, the capacity of our communities to be able to do that, but also really just building in the ownership of these communities. And that's the way that we've kind of gone about it, is by harnessing those infrastructures that exist within our faith-based and community-based organizations as trusted leaders, as trusted resources, building their capacity to actually meet these needs. So we've got across 6 states now. We started out solely focusing on diabetes prevention 4 years ago. And now we've created hubs across these 6 states that now not only house diabetes prevention programs, but they also house mental health interventions. They house brain health and Alzheimer's and dementia initiatives as well. And they also now are engaging their communities around the Affordable Connectivity program, assisting individuals with getting enrolled into that program, and then also shifting the conversation to allow and invite other organizations into their spaces to be able to serve as these kind of centralized hubs where you can actually really tackle a lot of the needs and priorities that these communities are really trying to get at, especially on the kind of socioeconomic side. So we've got churches in South Carolina that through addressing food insecurity are also creating economic investments in the community. Our founder donated land. We have 15 churches now operating, working that land, being paid to operate that land. I think they just put up a nice greenhouse on the land. And now that entire city, and to Dr. Gant's point, we've got university partners who are coming alongside now to say, well, we will support this community project, supporting the churches with identifying funding, as well as providing that kind of, skilled and capacity building set. And it's been extremely not only empowering for these small rural churches and communities, but, for these families that are connected to it, it shifted their mindsets to what's possible and what's available to them. So I think, looking at how we scale, it's looking at how do we create these infrastructures that can be sustainable, because again, it really does take a village, and we all can't, be everything to everyone. Yeah. But it's the partnerships and the relationships that really, really are crucial to scaling any of this work.
That's amazing. Thank you, Pamela. I'm going to shift to you, Jeff. You have the last word here, and if you can, I know we're running a little bit over, but in a minute or two, just talking about seeding and scaling, from what you talked about earlier with Disability In, you have this huge corporate network, breaking down those silos, cross-sector partnerships, bringing in small businesses as well. Just if you could tell us how that came into being and how you were able to accomplish you know, that kind of environment, you know, as quickly as you have. If I still have you. Is Jeff still here?
Jeff Whistle, he had to step away from
Yeah, he had to step away. Okay. Well, we'll just highlight that and put a pin on it. And Leticia, I'll go back to you for the next segment.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Well, we and a lot of the conversation has revolved about strategic outreach initiatives, but you know, for me, I'm a silo breaker, and I personally dislike when we say it's always been done that way. We are curious to learn about, you know, how have you been able to successfully spread the word and get, you know, these outreach initiatives working? What would you like others to know that has worked for you? Or maybe that hasn't worked for you. So I invite you again to just turn on the camera or put your hand up if you want to share anything with the group in terms of strategic outreach initiatives.
Yeah, I'll throw in one. So Angela Seifer, whom you all know, and I worked on a project a long time ago with Dodge City, Kansas. And initially, you know, was coming to do a stakeholder analysis and figure out where the contours were for support for doing broadband and digital equity type of work. And initially, when we asked the name of stakeholders to bring in, you got the usual suspects. I love your point, Leticia, about how do we break the silo? Just thinking very carefully about who's in, and somebody also mentioned about who's invited to the table is super important, because if you have the usual suspect, it's such a simple thing, but the usual suspects, you get the same answers. You get the same contours of agreement, same contours of disagreement. Be very intentional to broaden that circle. And then be very intentional even to broaden the agenda that's being presented and really allow and foster fertile ground for deliberation from the ground up about this. Be inclusive. Remember, folks are going to be at the table that may have not ever been there. Help folks have a voice in these conversations. Help folks have an ear to listen and make a safe space to change in that process.
That's powerful advice for this conversation and for anything in life. So I thank you very much, John, and I hope that you feel that that's what we attempted to do here. We put all our brains together in bringing, you know, as many people as we thought could contribute. So I thank you for that. We'll finish this section with Juliet, that I know has her hand up.
Yeah. So I think this question around outreach, what's working, what hasn't worked is really interesting. I think we're always trying new things every day. One of the things that we have worked on with our PHL Connected program, which is our program to connect our pre-K through 12 households with internet access, really was a wide blanket of things. So we were working with community-based organizations to get out the word. We were working with, you know, training community-based organizations to then use their networks to spread the word. But when it came down to it, ultimately what we heard time and time again was that families get their information from their teachers and their principals, from their schools, right? And so the more that we could embed the information within those, when we say trusted partners, like very specific partners, those school partners, our libraries too, that's another institution where folks continually said over and over again, I get my information from the library. And our rec centers where people are going, they were, during the pandemic, that was the system that was open. So they were getting their information at their rec centers. Those networks became really critical. And then the other thing that we found when we were doing outreach and communication is that don't ignore, I mean, this is really obvious, but don't ignore those traditional media methods. We always talked about a TV bump. Every time somebody got on TV, there was a bump in interest or reaching out or hearing more. Your local community papers, your subway signs, like your print materials too. So I think that when we talk about outreach, and all of that is, you know, there's multiple methods. And then finally, what we are moving toward, particularly around increasing access to the internet and increasing awareness of the programs that are being offered, is that we're doing more direct phone banking and door-to-door knocking, because that level of work really fosters conversations, and you learn more one-on-one about what are the needs, what were the problems, what were the challenges, and you have people, community-based organizations often doing that work with us, who can really say to someone, I've got you, let me come back, I'm gonna share more information with you, I'm gonna, call right now, someone to help you while I'm in front of you at the doorway. So those methods, we can't ignore that really groundwork that has to happen around outreach. Can't just send out an email, obviously.
Well, thanks for that. Now I know why the city of Philadelphia is always showcased with that leadership. Is no surprise. And so I know I said last one, but I have the chair of our committee, Heather, with the hand up. So I have to give the word to you, of course.
Oh dear. Yes. I just wanted to share something exciting. What we're doing is we're working on a program to tap in and untapped resource, which are youth. We are working on a program which is sort of like a mentorship program, and really deputizing the youth to become digital skills and digital inclusion ambassadors in their own community, because who knows technology better than us? It's the kids. And so what we did a few months ago, we had a kids digital inclusion summit where kids shared very exciting ideas about how they were motivating other kids. And so we realized that these very same kids were very skilled and very talented and had these leadership skills. So we're putting together a program that will provide them the resources and the incentives and startup money for them to start their own community-based digital skills training program, where they're tasked with training their own parents, their grandparents, and community members. We will be launching it during Digital Inclusion Week. So we're really excited to partner with schools, after-school programs, and local community organizations to actually co-mentor those students so they can become leaders in their own communities. And so that is a pipeline that's untapped.
I love that. I love that. What better than advocate for leader digital skills than the kids? That I think sounds like very successful. Well, thanks for sharing that, Heather. And now I'm happy to pass the word to Diane to help us close the session.
Greetings. Hi. Oh, can you hear me? Wait. There I am. Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, at least I can.
Yep. You're clear. Well, I can't imagine a better segue into our final question than the comments, the last three speakers' comments, John and Juliet, and of course Heather, because the question really has to do with how do we take the steps necessary? How do we reach out to communities effectively that aren't currently in our universe and in our networks? To make sure that they have the information and that they have the opportunity to be a part of this incredible opportunity and movement. And I know it sounds like, I mean, I love it, kids, and I love television, and I love, the TV bump and all of the things that have been mentioned, because of course that's about public communication and what that means to get the word out. But there are programs, depending upon where you are and meeting people where they are, that are particularly relevant and particularly important, that spark that interest and that motivation to follow up and to get involved and to find out how to actually participate. And one of the things that obviously this is an initiative and a commitment and a vision of the FCC. And the FCC has established programs to promote digital equity and equal access, the Emergency Broadband Benefit and the ACP program. And we heard this morning from Rashawn about how important it is that we all in our networks are getting the word out about those programs and understanding the opportunities that they can provide, again, to individuals, communities, rural and urban, to just plain get connected. And so final question, and happy to entertain anybody who has any ideas about it. And I actually was going to call on Juliet, but she just shared with us. So Juliet, if you have more ideas about this particular focus, I'd be delighted to hear them. But if you have ideas about that, please raise your hand and share. Andrew, thank you. Andrew, thank you.
Thanks, Diane. I just wanted to mention, well, I was tempted to say all of the above. We need to be on a roadshow in communities because nothing can substitute for the reach of community groups and local employers, libraries, everybody that's assembled on this call. I think it's really important, though, that so we don't burn ourselves out, and we really are making the most of our time and energy, not to reinvent the wheel when it comes to training resources. So I'm looking at in front of me, and we'll share after this call, a national landscape scan on adult literacy instruction. There are so many great resources that are there with employer endorsement that when in the hands of some of the digital navigators on this call, that's what they can focus on, really connecting the learners to the right training and on to their next opportunity. I think the other thing I would add is in terms of employers, Kermit raised the importance of getting like regional and industry validation. Definitely true. Coursera and Digital Us, and there's a coalition of employers focused on digital equity. And I think trying to redefine in a joined up way what digital literacy means, and to create badging skill standards and a badge that then could be used in communities. So that's a lot to digest, but I think the common creation of these resources and getting them out, not both digitally and also through these in-person convenings, is really important.
And so perhaps, Andrew, do you have ideas about what would be an effective, efficient way to do that? We're talking about putting together a toolkit and bringing together those resources in a way, but posting them is one thing, and then actually bringing them into communities is another. Ideas about that?
Yeah, I guess we do need common repositories and the playbooks. The FCC has a unique, sort of imprimatur, so I think let's use that. I think again, you've got, I think, ambassadors on this call who are ready to go. And, especially given the intersection with the Digital Equity Act and funding, people's attention are aligned in a way they never have been before. So I guess both. But
yes, and yes, and. Got it. Great. Thank you very much. We heard that about the FCC. So Heather, have you got your hand up again?
Do not. I'm failing to put my hand down.
That's okay. I just thought I would check. Okay, Juliet, thank you.
Yeah, happy to talk more about this. I just want to acknowledge that I think that the ACP is an absolutely essential program. We're seeing, thousands and thousands of people sign up for it, to the point where if we continue to be successful in doing the outreach around it, I am starting to be worried about our ability to continue the program and when the money will run out. So I just want to name that because I think it's a real, I think it's a very important program to ensure, particularly in places where in urban settings, but will be true everywhere, that folks can afford their internet connectivity. So I do want to acknowledge it. I also think that there's ways that what we see on the ground is it is really challenging for folks to do the multi-steps around both signing up for ACP and then calling their providers. And so I just want to acknowledge that. Because that's the work that our digital navigators do, and they do, and our healthcare organizations do, and a lot of community-based organizations do, our churches do, all of that, is that hand-holding work with folks. Sometimes it can take them just a few minutes to get through the ACP form, but then it could take an hour on a call with a provider to actually turn on that service. Sometimes it can take a while for them to get all the documents that they need to just complete their ACP application and sort of be approved for that. So I'm very interested in thinking through with everybody here, and the FCC, ways that we can continue to improve that program, ways we can streamline benefit access so that folks don't have to reapply for things. And then ways in which we can hold some of our friends in our ISP community accountable to really making sure that it's as simple as possible for folks. So I do want to acknowledge that. And then the last thing I will say, it's not ACP, but the ECF program, the Emergency Connectivity Fund, was a really valuable program for libraries and schools. It's one of the few ways that we can get bulk purchasing of devices out to the community. And libraries and schools are positioned in such ways to do that bulk purchasing and then to provide those digital skills. So I don't want to overlook that program. I know it was not in the grant package, but I want to mention it because I think that it is a tool that we shouldn't overlook down the road if we can find a way to continue it.
I'm so glad you responded. So helpful, very practical, is so well informed by experience. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Pamela.
I really want to just ditto everything that Juliet just said, because so we've been, as a part of our work with the Black Churches for Digital Health Equity, we've been actually hosting enrollment events for ACP as well as the EBP as well. And that was one of the things that came up. Is there a way to better streamline the application? I'm bringing you the same documentation that I did to, for the program I'm qualified for. So I ditto everything Juliet just said. And one of the things that now that, we've got enrollments, again, we have people's attention, I think for us is also now advocating for a better trickle down, if you will, of the funding that is going to the actual building up of our digital and technical advances in these spaces. So I think just like our schools and our libraries had access to certain fundings, it would be nice now to extend that to other community-based organizations. Our churches during COVID, they shifted their entire, Sunday, Wednesday, their entire operations into digital spaces, and they had to do that, unfortunately, without funding. And so I think really looking at how do we maximize not only the attention that is being placed on this digital equity conversation right now, but also how do we make sure that these state broadband offices are really connected down to the grassroots, down to the community levels, so that we can again start to see more of the scaling and the infrastructure building.
Okay, so as in you mean it, ditto, but and then some, right? Okay, anything else? Does anybody else have anything to add to that? I think the FCC has expressed and demonstrated its deep commitment to these issues and these initiatives, and welcomes, I know, your feedback about what works and what doesn't, just as we all do. So I'm gonna take a few minutes and ask whether or not that's our last question, and I'm just gonna take the license and liberty to ask if there's anything that we didn't ask that you think is absolutely essential to address here this afternoon. This won't be our last conversation, the work continues, but I want to make sure as we close that everybody has had the opportunity to share that idea or that point that you came in here to make, and we want to make sure you leave here having made it. You can turn on your camera. Okay, it sounds like not. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you to all turn on your cameras. So we can all look at each other and sort of at least make little tiny digital eye contact as we conclude this incredibly important and valuable day. Just very quick remarks, and then we do have a few more comments at the end. I'm not saying goodbye, do not hang up. This is just the end of the moderator's part of this. So I just want to express, Matt and Letitia, I'm speaking for you, but our deep, incredible appreciation and thanks for what has truly exceeded. I don't know about anybody else, but this is just, I had high expectations knowing who was going to be here, and you guys off the charts, just moonshot. It was incredible. This is not my space. I'm higher ed, and it's just, I learned something every single day from this group, but today was just extraordinary. And I want to thank you, and I know so too does Matt and Letitia, for being here. The work continues, as I said, and this group now is going to turn our attention to that toolkit, and we hope at some point some draft of a national upskilling policy. And we look forward to having all of you actively engaged in contributing to that toolkit, because clearly the wisdom, the energy, the passion, and the vision that we all need in this country is right here in this virtual space. So I want to thank you. Matt, you want to join in?
Yes, thank you, Diane. Every, as it's really great when this could have literally gone on for twice as much time, and we would have been rolling still. So it was tough to pack it in. But thank you all for your amazing experience, the work you're doing, the perspectives you're bringing, and echoing what Diane said. This is a starting point for the next year of the work we're going to be doing. And you're all now part of the Army. So we're going to be reaching back out and sharing more of the stories, the toolkit, upskilling plan, and thank you all for everything you're doing and being here today.
Okay, and I think Letitia, anything?
Nothing. I will represent it in you other than I'm very inspired by the work you all are doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And now I think I turn this back to Jamila, correct?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Diane. And before I give my omnibus thanks, I wanted to turn it over to two of our colleagues on the Innovation and Access Working Group, Sherman Kizart, whom some of you may have met this morning when he had a question, and Eve Lewis. And they're going to try to give us a little recap of the high points of what we heard in this town hall. Hard to pack it all in, but we asked them to stand by and listen carefully and give us some of the big takeaways. So Eve and Sherman, if you all would turn on your cameras. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamila. And this was an amazing program. Thank you all so much. I just want to echo what everyone before me has stated. My name is Eve Lewis. I'm in-house counsel to a city here in Florida. It's the city of Coconut Creek. So saying that, I obviously view these issues through a local government lens. And just to be brief, I wanted to highlight some of the tangible takeaways that I saw through my vantage point. And there were three, obviously many, many more, but just three that I wanted to highlight. One was the trusted advisors. Two was meeting people where they are. And three is a commitment and a plan for continuous engagement. First, the trusted advisors and voices. I loved that idea to pull in the isolated populations that we don't get to reach every day. So I loved the idea that there was, I think City of Philadelphia had the seed money for grants for community-based projects that not only reduced language barriers, but also reduced the digital skills gap. So meeting both of those needs at the same time, that's mind-blowing and wonderful. I'd love to piggyback off of that idea here in my locality. As well, I love the idea that was born from that discussion where you start using the mobile device, the phones, and then you build with more and more complex devices to foster the deeper competencies that each of us will need. And obviously what we're trying to do is bridge the digital divide. So I love the idea of that progress and the measurable metrics over time. The second big bullet point issue, I think, was meeting people where they are. And I loved how we talked about in Portland, Oregon, the mobile computer lab. That is genius. I want to see how that's rolled out. Obviously, I love the idea of the device loan program. I think that's wonderful. I think a real key that was talked about there is the demand, that now there's so much demand for this that we can't even meet that demand. So that parlays to the third observation or takeaway that I had is our commitment and our plan to continuously engage and collaborate in this space. If we are going to build digital bridges and be future ready, then we have to expand who's at the table, like Dr. Gant mentioned, being intentional about broadening our discussion and including the youth ambassadors, being ambassadors ourselves, but also tapping into other resources that we hadn't thought of. So thank you, Heather Gate, for that amazing idea. And also, I think what was wonderful and a tangible takeaway was giving our direct contact information. It's so easy to get lost in a big corporate, world out there, but having your face and your name and your direct contact information up on your website or anywhere that it can be reached is how we will really,
make that continuous collaboration with one another. So thank you so much. I'm in awe of each of you, and I'll turn it over to Sherman. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. I appreciate it. And your observations as far as were absolutely spot on. Good afternoon, everyone. Superlatives have been thrown around throughout for the entire day, and rightfully so. From our keynote all the way to our town hall, today has been truly exceptional in terms of the journey that we're on with respect to the work of the CDC and working across both federal agencies, state agencies, and local entities. And I thought it was for me, what I would share with you was that to start with FCC chair, former FCC chairwoman, Mignon Clyburn, was absolutely exceptional. And I'll tell you why. I happened to be with Chairwoman Clyburn in Mississippi about exactly a month ago. And she continues to be very, very passionate about not just about the work of the FCC overall, but certainly in this whole area of addressing the opportunities around broadband and digital inequities. And she had, I think Jamila will say that we need to hashtag, I should say, Chairwoman Clyburn's very, very important quote, where she said, "Analog islands aren't resort paradises. Analog islands aren't resort paradises." And that is just so very, very, very true. And it set a terrific foundation for to go from Chairwoman Clyburn's very, very passionate, very, very pointed address to the session that Heather hosted. And one of the people, what I would share with everyone on the call is that I'm a native Mississippian, and to see that the state of Mississippi, that oftentimes is just when you look at the challenges that the state has had, including everyone saw what happened with the whole situation with the water crisis and its impact on all of its citizens down in Jackson. But in this whole area of around broadband and how for me as a native Mississippian to hear Sally Doty, the executive director of BEAM, which is Mississippi's Broadband Expansion and Accessibility Authority, how Mississippi is taking a very, very aggressive and very, very intentional approach around this whole area of digital equity was phenomenal. That to hear that Ms. Doty has created a digital, what I would call a state version of the CDC, and she's hired a director who's a council person in the city of Jackson, who is focused on what will be how that state is going to address digital inequities. So to hear that from my home state and a state that is not seen as the state that is really committed and effective in those kind of areas was just something that I absolutely had to take note of. And then, and of course, as we go into the last session, the thing that I was really, that common thing of meeting people where they are. I thought to hear a young lady who works with the churches to say it's not just enough to meet people where they are, but you meeting them where they are physically, meeting them where they are emotionally, meeting them where they are financially. That is going to be so important in the work that we do over the next for years as we address this whole issue of digital inequity. One thing I forgot to mention that I think former FCC Chairwoman Clyburn mentioned. She asked, and it was basically a reference to the Affordable Connectivity Program, and I know that program is focused on providing low cost to no cost internet broadband, high-speed broadband access. I thought Chairwoman Clyburn to raise the issue that I thought I heard her advocate that it should probably be no cost. And I think that's going to be something that it'd be interesting to see where that kind of thought and perspective goes. But again, what I want to drive home the point is that the superlatives flew, and rightfully so, throughout the entire day of our symposium, and it actually this is a day to be proud of, and we have an opportunity to build from what we heard today. So those are my observations, and at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Jamila Best Johnson.
Well, thank you so much, Sherman and Eve. We appreciate you, and we're so glad that we asked you to summarize the high points, because you all gave us something to think about as we depart this virtual room today. I want to turn it over briefly to our CEDC Chair, Heather Gate, and if our Vice Chair, Susan Allen, is still on the line, we'd like to hear their closing remarks. Heather, Susan?
Thank you, Jamila, and thank you so much. I really appreciate Eve and Sherman's summarization of the event. So I don't want to repeat what they said, but they're exactly right about the high points of today. You all town hall participants were selected because not only are you respected in what you do, but you represent the diversity of this country. And the Innovation and Access Working Group was very strategic about selecting you for the great work you were doing. And so we selfishly really wanted to learn from the best. And I think we accomplished that in terms of gathering this information that will ultimately help the Innovation and Access Working Group move ahead with their plan. But at the same time, I also hope that this event was as beneficial to you all as it was to us, and that new relationships and new work can begin today. I also wanted to highlight the fact, again, going back to the Digital Equity Act and the planning grants starting to roll out to the states next week. Want to make sure that these wonderful ideas are represented in those plans, so that once the money starts coming for implementation, these wonderful projects can continue beyond and are future ready. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and for sharing with us these great and wonderful ideas. And again, thanks to former Chairwoman Clyburn for joining us and really setting the tone for what turned out to be a wonderful discussion today. And then last but not least, I would be remiss if I did not thank the work stream that put this together, that have been working for weeks and weeks coming together. For those that don't know, the members that participate in this council do so on a volunteer basis, but I have to commend them for the commitment to the process and showing up week in, week out to do this public service. And so I would like to extend my thanks to the Innovation and Access workstream that really led this process, beginning with the working group chair, Robert Brooks. I wanted to thank Matthew Bauer, who has been a fearless leader for this specific work stream on digital skills, and his tireless work and emails at 10 o'clock at night in order to get everything together have been breathtaking and heartwarming. I also want to thank Dr. Diane Lynch for her fearless co-leadership as well. Letitia Latino, thank you so much. Sherman Kizart, Eve Lewis, Edgar Class, Monica Desai, Daniel Ball, Alicia Tambay, and Dr. John Gant thank you so much for really doing all the hard work. Now that you've got all this information, we look forward to the next step, which is the write-up and putting together the materials and the toolkits to continue this work. I also want to thank my vice chair, who happens to lead the work stream. We try to divide and conquer our working groups, and that is Susan Allen. Thank you so much, Susan. Your guidance of this working group is so much appreciated, and your passion, again, it warms my heart. And then, of course, Jamila Vest-Johnson, our DFO. Jamila, I am amazed by you and the amount of work that you put up with us with such a big council and keeping us working and keeping us on schedule and keeping us going. Thank you so much, and we appreciate your passion for the work as well. It's very heartwarming. So thank you, everybody. And now I would like to invite my vice chair, Susan, to provide your closing comments.
Well, Heather,
yes,
our chair, you had the last word. You said it all. All I can say is ditto, ditto, ditto. From the FCC entire team, and of course, Jamila, without you and your guiding light and your team, we would not have been able to keep the train running on time and arrive at the train station and get into this destination early. I want to thank you all for all this work you've done, and of course, the working group work stream chair, Matt, and all of you. I don't want to repeat the name again. I do want to return the last 2 minutes back to you. Well done. We have come a long way. There's a lot longer way to go, but our destination is digital equity, more education, more training workforce, so that America could truly lead the world with this new generation of folks who will be so connected that people will fear us more. Thank you again. You got your last minute back. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Jamila, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. No, we're fine. I'm just going to take just a minute to do thank yous. We have had just a marvelous series of conversations today about digital equity. And on behalf of the Federal Communications Commission, we hope that you have learned something useful in terms of opportunities to engage in the impactful work of digital equity. Please stay connected to the CEDC as we continue these efforts to encourage diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our website is www.fcc.gov/communications-and-diversity-council. We want to thank everyone who supported this event. I begin with my CEDC colleagues at the FCC, Rashan Duval, Co-Deputy Designated Federal Officer, Kayla Hernandez Ulloa, Co-Deputy Designated Federal Officer, and Aurelie Matthew, Attorney Advisor in the Wireline Competition Bureau. Our FCC tech team, Jeff Reardon, Steve Balderson, and Greg Huff. Thank you so much for your steady hand in hosting today's meeting and for all of your time for our dry run sessions. Thank you also to FCC Chairwoman Rosenworcel and to her team. Our thanks also to our Media Bureau Chief, Holly Sarr, and her team for co-hosting this event today. Huge thank you to former acting FCC Chairwoman Mignon Clyburn for her encouraging remarks. It was great to have you here. And thank you so much to each of our fabulous symposium panelists who gave us so much to consider. Thank you to our town hall participants for a stimulating conversation on how they would recommend collaboration between unlikely stakeholders in the charge for digital equity. This would not have happened without the dedication and passion of our Innovation and Access Working Group members. Thank you so, so much for your public service. And lastly, we are very, very grateful to have dedicated leaders of the CEDC, unparalleled dedication. Chair Heather Gate, Susan R. Allen, Vice Chair, and Nicole Turner-Lee, Vice Chair. So thank you to everyone for joining the collaboration and conversation today. We hope to see you again. Be well.